You ever hear a riddle that feels simple at first, until your brain starts twisting itself into knots trying to make sense of it? That's what liar puzzles do. They pretend to be logical, fair, even solvable, until every answer leads you into a contradiction. These aren't just games. They're battles of logic, traps built with words, and tests that force you to question every assumption you didn't even realize you were making. In this video, we're going deep into the most mind-bending liar puzzles ever created, the kind that mess with your head, flip your reasoning upside down, and leave you wondering if truth even exists at all. If you think you're good at spotting lies, you're exactly who this will fool. But before that, drop a quick comment and let us know where you're watching this from and what time it is for you. It's amazing how we're all connected, each of us chasing that perfect night's sleep. If this resonates with you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel Restwise, and join the journey. The two-door riddle outright. Picture this. You're standing in front of two massive doors. One leads to freedom. The other one, well, it's game over. Behind each door stands a guard. Now here's the twist. One of these guards always tells the truth. The other one lies every single time. No exceptions. You don't know which guard is which. You don't know which door is which. You can ask only one question. That's it. One shot to not screw this up. Now pause. This isn't just some abstract puzzle. This is a psychological trap. It messes with your sense of logic, your ability to trust, and most of all, your instincts. Because here's the messed up part. Even when people know the answer, they still second-guess it. That's how deep this riddle goes. So now you're probably thinking, what question do I ask? How do I beat this setup where lies and truth look the same? Here's where it gets spicy. The answer, the real one, sounds like something out of a math professor's fever dream. You ask either guard this. If I ask the other guard which door leads to freedom, what would he say? And then, whatever they say, you choose the opposite door. That's it. Simple on the surface. Brain melting once you start unpacking it. Because let's break it down. You're dealing with two layers of deception. If you ask the liar what the truth teller would say, he'll lie about the truth. So you get a lie. If you ask the truth teller what the liar would say, he'll truthfully tell you the liar's lie. Still a lie. Either way, the answer points you to the wrong door, which means you flip it. Now think about that for a second. You're not asking for the truth. You're asking for the lie and then using that lie to find the truth. You're hijacking the system. It's like hacking a locked vault by forcing it to contradict itself. This is why the two-door riddle isn't just about logic. It's about power, because in real life, we deal with this all the time, trying to figure out what's true when everyone around us is playing their own angle. News cycles, sales pitches, manipulative people, politicians. You don't always get a clear truth or a clear lie. Sometimes all you get is noise, conflicting stories, people who swear they're being honest, and others who never say what they mean. So how do you know who to trust? That's what makes this riddle so damn timeless. It forces you to stop listening to words and start listening to the structure of what's being said. You look for patterns. You create a system that works, no matter who's lying. And here's the psychological insight most people miss. When you're under pressure, like when you have one question, one choice, and the stakes are life or death, your brain starts to panic. It wants a shortcut. It looks for facial expressions, tone of voice, any sign of trust. But those things betray you, because a liar can sound sincere. A truth teller can sound uncertain. Your gut can lie to you harder than any guard ever could. So instead of relying on intuition, this riddle forces you to rely on structure, on logic that holds up even when the whole system is rigged against you. That's powerful. And you know what? This isn't just theory. There's a version of this riddle in real life. It shows up in hostage negotiations, intelligence work, even street-level cons. The smartest people aren't the ones who guess who's honest. They're the ones who set up questions that expose contradictions, and then they act based on those. And you might think, well, that's clever and all, but it's just a puzzle. But no, it's a mindset. It teaches you to build fail-safes into your thinking. It teaches you how to ask questions that make the truth reveal itself, not because someone hands it to you, but because the system has no choice but to give it away. There's a deeper message buried in the riddle. It's not just about two doors. It's about how we face impossible choices, how we think when the rules are unclear, when we can't tell who's playing straight, and when we only get one shot. Because here's the truth. Life doesn't always give you honest guides. Sometimes the people you count on the most are the ones misleading you, not because they're evil, but because they're stuck in their own version of the truth. And sometimes, the person who helps you escape is the one you thought you couldn't trust. This puzzle dares you to stop looking for who is right and start looking at how the question works. That shift in thinking, it changes everything. It teaches you how to see through games, lies, manipulation. And when you learn how to do that, not just in a riddle, but in life, you're unstoppable. Now here's the real kicker. Most people hear this riddle, nod, maybe even repeat the answer at parties. But they never feel what it's doing. They never realize it's a survival test, a trap wrapped in logic, a lesson disguised as a game. And the crazy part, there's an even trickier version of this puzzle out there, with more doors, more liars, and zero room for error. But that one's for another time. Knights and Caves Island. Imagine landing on an island where every single person you meet is either a knight or a knave. Sounds innocent, right? But here's the twist. Knights always tell the truth, always. They couldn't lie if they tried. And knaves, they lie every single time. No exceptions. There's no in-between, no half-truths, no gray areas. It's all or nothing. So now you're walking through this strange island, trying to figure out who's who. You meet a local. He looks at you, completely serious, and says, "I am a knave." Now hold up. If he's a knight, he's telling the truth. But then he can't be a knave. That's a contradiction. And if he's a knave, he's lying. Which means he's not a knave. That's also a contradiction. You're stuck, just from one sentence. That's the magic of knights and knaves puzzles. They seem simple, but they mess with your head in ways you don't expect. It's like trying to untangle logic while someone is constantly switching the rules behind your back. And it gets worse, because the real nightmare starts when there's more than one of them. You meet two islanders. One of them says, "Only one of us is a knave." The other just nods. Now you're in this loop of second, guessing every possibility. What if they're both knaves? What if they're both knights? Is one trying to throw you off? Is the other saying nothing on purpose? This isn't just a riddle. This is psychological warfare in polite conversation form. The terrifying part is how fast your brain starts to bend under pressure. You don't realize how much you depend on subtle cues, tone, context, vibes, until all of that is stripped away and you're left with only logic. Because that's what this island teaches you. Emotion doesn't help. Gut feelings are useless. All you have is what was said, not what you think they meant, not how they said it, just raw language, and your ability to break it down. And here's where it gets real. In a lot of ways, this island, it's a metaphor for modern communication. We live in a world where not everyone is trying to tell the truth. Some people lie constantly. Others bend the truth just enough to confuse you. And most of us, we're just trying to figure out who's actually being real. But what if you could crack the code? That's what these puzzles train you to do. They sharpen your logic, force you to slow down, strip away emotion, see what's really being said, not what you want to hear. And here's the kicker. These types of puzzles have been studied by logicians and philosophers for centuries. There's even a famous version created by Raymond Smullyan, who turned this island idea into an entire system of paradoxes. He didn't just make them hard. He made them feel like real conversations, which is what makes them so addicting and so disturbing. Because 1 minute you're solving a cute riddle, and the next you're questioning how you trust anything anyone says. There's even a puzzle where you meet an islander who says, "You will never solve this riddle." Now that might sound like taunting, but on this island, that's a logic bomb. Because if they're a knight and telling the truth, then you're doomed. If they're a knave and lying, then maybe you will solve it. But how do you act on that? What do you do when the truth itself becomes the trap? And here's the real danger. You start to project. You want someone to be a knight. You want them to be honest. So you treat their words that way. But that emotional bias, it's a liability here. It leads you into the exact kind of logic trap this place is built on. Knights and caves puzzles expose your assumptions. They force you to build truth from contradiction. They teach you how to question the question itself. And once you see the pattern, once you really understand how to work through them, something changes. You stop being fooled by surface answers. You start looking for internal consistency. You stop asking who's lying and you start asking what has to be true. That shift, it's a superpower, because the deeper you go into these puzzles, the more they stop feeling like riddles and start feeling like mental combat drills. You're training your brain to detect deception, to unravel confusion, to stay calm when the logic seems to eat itself alive. And here's what really keeps people hooked. It's not just about solving the puzzle. It's about the feeling when the answer clicks. That moment where you go from total confusion to total clarity, like flipping on a light switch in a pitch-black room. It's addictive, because you didn't guess. You figured it out. You earned it. And then you look back and realize the answer was always hiding in plain sight. But just when you think you've got it all figured out, the island throws something new at you. Something twisted. Something impossible. And yeah, you're going to want to see that one. The liar paradox. Okay, let's get weird for a second. You walk into a room. Nothing special. Just a single piece of paper taped to the wall. On it, in plain letters, are the words, "This sentence is false." That's it. And your brain immediately locks up. Because, wait, if the sentence is false, though, then it's telling the truth. But if it's telling the truth, then it must be false. And just like that, you're caught in an infinite logic loop that feels like it's short-circuiting reality. Welcome to the liar paradox. It's not just a clever riddle. This one messes with the very foundation of how we understand truth. Because most of the time we think of things in binary terms. True or false, yes or no, black or white. But this doesn't fit. It refuses to behave. It breaks the rules and then dares you to fix them. And here's the really uncomfortable part. There is no satisfying answer. Not a trick. Not a clever workaround. It's a perfect loop. If it's false, it's true. If it's true, it's false. Back and forth forever. It's like trying to step outside your own shadow. You can't win. You can only stare at it and go, "What the hell?" But what makes this even more wild is how old it is. This isn't some Reddit brain teaser. This has been tormenting philosophers since ancient Greece. There's even an early version attributed to a guy named Epimenides who said all Cretans are liars. He was from Crete. So, was he lying? Or telling the truth? You see how fast this spirals. And yeah, it sounds academic. But this paradox shook logic to its core. Mathematicians, linguists, even computer scientists have had to wrestle with the ripple effects of this one dumb little sentence. Because it exposed something most people don't realize. Truth isn't just about facts. It's about structure. It's about context. It's about how information refers to itself. See, the problem with the liar paradox is self-reference. The sentence is talking about itself. It's like a snake eating its own tail. It folds in on itself, and suddenly the whole system collapses. You're not just confused. The idea of truth itself gets destabilized. Now here's where things get really disturbing. In the 1930s, a logician named Kurt Gödel used this exact kind of paradox to prove something that blew everyone's mind. No logical system, not even math, can be both complete and consistent. Let me say that again. The thing we all think is rock solid. Numbers, equations, the language of the universe. It has cracks. And one of the cracks looks exactly like the liar paradox. Gödel created a mathematical version of a statement that basically says, this statement is unprovable. And just like the liar sentence, it loops back on itself. If it is provable, then it's false. But if it isn't provable, then it's true, which means there's a true statement that can't be proven. Boom. Game over. So this little paradox, it's not a party trick. It's the tip of an existential iceberg. It suggests that there are limits to what can be known, limits to what can be proven. And once you let that sink in, it starts to creep into everything. Language, logic, belief systems, even identity. Because think about it. How often do people say things that contradict themselves? Not on purpose, but because the system they're using to describe reality is broken. I always lie. I know that I don't know. Ignore everything I say. These aren't just contradictions. They're logical traps. And once you fall into one, it's hard to climb out. But here's what makes the liar paradox so addictive. It's simple. Like, stupidly simple. It's one sentence. Just a few words. But it cracks open this bottomless void where rules don't work anymore. And when you try to fix it, when you say, oh okay, maybe it's neither true nor false, you run into a new problems. If that's allowed, then our whole system for reasoning needs to be rewritten. And that scares people. Because deep down we all want certainty. We want things to be true or false. We want to point at something and say, yep, that's real, that's safe, that's right. But the liar paradox laughs at that. It doesn't care what you want. It just exists, floating in that impossible space where logic collapses under its own weight. And you know what? There's a kind of beauty in that. It reminds us that not everything has a clean answer. That sometimes, the smartest thing you can do is admit that the system is broken. That certainty isn't always an option, and maybe, just maybe, that's not a flaw. Maybe that's a feature. Because the moment you accept that some things don't fit, you open the door to deeper thinking, to better questions, to more honest conversations. You stop pretending that everything has to make sense, and you start asking why we believe the things we do. And if one sentence, just 7 words, can do that to your brain, imagine what else is hiding in the spaces between true and false. The 3 gods riddle. You ever find yourself in a situation where no matter what you ask, you can't tell if the answer is helping you or burying you deeper? Now imagine this. You're standing in front of 3 gods. Not just any gods. These ones have rules. One of them always tells the truth. One always lies. And the third, total wild card, completely unpredictable, sometimes tells the truth, sometimes lies, no rhyme, no reason, just chaos. The problem, you don't know which god is which, and you only get to ask 3 yes or no questions. Total, not per god, 3 questions across all 3 gods. And the final punch, they don't even speak your language. They answer in words you don't understand, day and ja. One of them means yes, one means no, but they won't tell you which is which. So here you are. 3 gods. 3 questions. Foreign language. One of them is a liar. One's honest. One is a coin toss with a personality. And you're supposed to figure out who's who with nothing but logic and raw mental stamina. Welcome to the 3 gods riddle. Possibly the most brutal logic problem ever created. It doesn't feel fair, and it's not supposed to. Every comfort zone you rely on in normal puzzles, it's been ripped away. No guaranteed honesty, no universal meaning, no way to double-check your assumptions. You have to build clarity out of confusion. You have to design questions that survive dishonesty, randomness, and a language barrier. It's like trying to crack a safe with no numbers, in the dark, while someone changes the combination mid-turn. But here's the wild part. It can be solved. There's a real solution. And it doesn't come from raw genius. It comes from thinking differently, from stepping outside the rules you think matter and realizing that the chaos can be cornered. If you know where to look, you don't try to outguess random. That's a waste. You isolate him. You craft your questions in a way that makes his unpredictability irrelevant. And you don't rely on understanding da or ja directly. You embed meaning into the structure of the question. You ask something like, if I asked you whether you are the God who always tells the truth, would you say duh? Now you're nesting hypotheticals, so even if you don't know what da means, the pattern of the response still leads somewhere solid. It's weird, it's abstract, but it's brilliant, because it's not about what you know. It's about how well you can use what you don't know. That's the real trap here. Not the gods, not the randomness. It's your own instinct to look for solid ground in a system that's been engineered to give you none. This puzzle forces you to let go of the need for comfort and certainty. You don't get to know if da means yes. You don't get to assume the answer makes sense. You only get to build logic that survives anyway. And that hits hard. Not just in puzzles, but in life. Because honestly, most of the time we're not dealing with clean truths or clear lies. We're surrounded by people's systems and signals that work on their own internal logic. Sometimes honest, sometimes not, sometimes just noise. This riddle, it's training for that. It teaches you to ask smarter questions, questions that carry truth inside them, no matter how twisted the answer looks on the outside. The randomness, the confusion, the lack of language, all of that's intentional. It's not just a puzzle. It's a pressure test. It shows you how your brain handles ambiguity, whether you freeze, guess, or adapt, whether you try to bend the chaos into meaning, or whether you surrender to it. That's why the three gods riddle is more than just a logic problem. It's a mirror. It shows you what kind of thinker you are when certainty disappears. It asks you whether you can build clarity with no guarantee of help, whether you can trust your system even when the system around you is broken, and when it finally clicks, when you realize that the answer was never in the gods, the language, or the randomness. It's one of the most satisfying moments in logic, because it means you didn't just solve a riddle. You outmaneuvered uncertainty itself. Self-referential statements. Most of the time, when we say something, we're talking about something. I love pizza. The sky is blue. You lied to me. Each of those points outward, to food, to weather, to someone else's behavior. But every now and then, language folds in on itself. It stops pointing outward and starts pointing directly back at the thing being said. That's when things get weird. That's when you step into the world of self-referential statements, where the sentence is talking about itself. And at first, it sounds harmless. Like, okay, so a sentence can refer to itself. So what? But the moment you actually start playing with it, like really looking at what happens when a statement turns the mirror on itself, everything begins to unravel. Because now you're not just dealing with grammar or meaning. You're dealing with recursion, with loops, with systems that are feeding on their own logic. And very quickly, that starts to break things. Let's start simple. Imagine a sentence that says, this sentence has 5 words. That one's fine. It's cute, a little meta, but it checks out. Now try this one. This sentence is false. That's where things go off the rails. Because if the sentence is true, then it's false. But if it's false, then it's actually true. You're stuck in a logical infinite loop, a feedback spiral that never lands. It keeps flipping back and forth on itself like a coin spinning in midair that never hits the table. This isn't just a cute riddle. That's the same kind of logic trap that led to some of the most devastating discoveries in mathematics and philosophy. Self-reference is what cracked the illusion that truth can be cleanly boxed up. It's what made Gödel's incompleteness theorems possible. The idea that no matter how perfect your system is, if it's powerful enough to describe itself, it will eventually collapse under the weight of its own rules. There will always be truths it can't prove, always questions it can't answer. And that is not just a logic issue. That's a worldview breaker. Because deep down, we're wired to believe that systems are complete, that there's an answer for everything as long as you search hard enough. But self-referential statements are like a glitch in the matrix. They expose the edge of the map. They remind you that sometimes the system itself is the problem, not because it's wrong, but because it's trying to contain something it's not built to hold. Think about it. What happens when a government passes a law that regulates how it passes laws? Or when a definition includes itself as part of the definition? Or when a person says, I am lying right now? You don't just get contradiction. You get systems collapsing into themselves like black holes. You get truth being eaten alive by the structure that's supposed to protect it. And it doesn't stop with sentences. This stuff shows up everywhere once you know how to look for it. In computer code, when a function calls itself with no end condition, infinite recursion. In philosophy, when the observer becomes part of what's being observed, the double bind. Even in therapy, when someone says, "I can't trust anything I think," it's not just logic, it's identity, belief, reality. And once self-reference gets in, it's really hard to get it out. Here's the part that twists the knife a little deeper. The human brain, it's built for self-reference. We're constantly reflecting on our own thoughts, thinking about what we're thinking, questioning whether our questions even make sense. It's how we evolved. It's what makes us intelligent, but it's also what drives us insane. Because the more we reflect, the more likely we are to end up in loops, doubting our doubts, believing our disbelief. It's a feature and a flaw at the same time. And yet, we can't stop doing it. We have to reflect. We can't just speak. We have to understand the structure behind what we're saying. We can't just think. We have to analyze whether our thoughts are valid. Self-reference is part of being conscious. It's what separates awareness from just raw data. But it also means we're always dancing near the edge of paradox. Always one loop away from collapse. And maybe that's why these statements hit so hard. Not because they're unsolvable, but because they're familiar. On some level, we all feel what it's like to question ourselves in circles. We all have moments where we wonder if we're lying to ourselves about lying to ourselves. We all try to use systems, logic, rules, language, to explain the mess of being human. But those systems weren't designed to look inward. Not this deeply. Not without consequences. So when a sentence says, "This sentence is not provable," it's not just a linguistic trick. It's a signal flare. A warning that if you build a system strong enough to describe the truth, that system will eventually describe itself. And when it does, it might implode. Or explode. Or just sit there, smirking, refusing to resolve, daring you to try again. And you will. Because that's what we do. We look into the paradox, and we go, "I can crack this." Even if we can't. Even if the loop never ends. Because somewhere in that impossible spiral, there's a truth that isn't supposed to be spoken. But we still want to find it. The forking path puzzle. You're standing at a fork in the road. Two paths stretch ahead. One leads to safety, the other to certain doom. No clues, no signs, just dirt and trees, and the cold weight of uncertainty sitting on your shoulders. But there's a catch. There's someone standing there. A person. Maybe a guard. Maybe a villager. Doesn't matter. You're allowed to ask them one question. Just one. Sounds like a lucky break, right? Here's the twist. This person is either from the village of truth tellers, people who always tell the truth, or from the village of liars, people who lie every time, no exceptions. You don't know which village they're from. You don't know which path is safe. And you get one shot, one question, to avoid walking straight into death. This is the forking path puzzle. It's not just a logic test. It's a trap disguised as a lifeline. And the more you think about it, the more the ground starts to shift under your feet. Because no matter what you ask, you have no way of knowing if the answer is honest or deliberately false. That's the part that messes with you. It's not the question. It's the doubt. Most people panic here. They freeze. Because we're not used to making decisions when we can't trust the source. We're conditioned to search for clarity, not operate in its absence. But this puzzle flips that instinct on its head. It dares you to find certainty inside contradiction. And it can be done. The trick is elegant. Brutal, but elegant. You don't ask which road is safe. You don't ask where the truth teller lives. You step one layer deeper. You ask, if I asked someone from your village which path leads to safety, what would they say? Then you take the opposite path. Sounds backward, but here's why it works. If you're talking to a truth teller, they'll tell you what a truth teller would say, and that's the correct path. But you're taking the opposite, so that seems wrong. Wait, but if they're a liar, they're lying about what a liar would say. And since the liar would lie, and they're lying about the lie, you're actually getting the real answer again. In both cases, the trick cancels the deception. What you get is always the wrong path, which means you can confidently go the other way. It's a logic boomerang. It bends through layers of distortion and still hits the truth on the way back. And there's something quietly beautiful about that. The idea that even in a world full of deception, you can still find a question that defeats the lie, not by forcing honesty, but by designing a trap so clever the truth leaks through the cracks, no matter who you're talking to. But this puzzle isn't just about roads or riddles. It's about something deeper, something human. Because think about how often we face this in real life. You meet someone, you need their advice, but you don't know if they're being honest or protecting their own interests or just saying what you want to hear. And in those moments, you're standing at a forking path of your own. One direction leads to truth, the other leads to regret. But the person in front of you, you can't read them. You don't know which village they're from. So what do? You have to ask smarter questions. You have to build your logic in a way that assumes deception is possible and still works. That's what this puzzle teaches you. Not how to solve a riddle, how to survive a world where honesty isn't guaranteed. There's a reason this kind of riddle has stuck around for centuries. Variations show up in mythology, folklore, philosophy. It's ancient, and it keeps coming back because it reflects something primal. Our fear of being lied to, our desperation to make the right choice when we can't tell what's real. It's the mental version of walking through fog with cliffs on both sides. And yet, there's a calm inside the chaos, because once you understand how the logic turns in on itself, how the liar's lie can become a kind of indirect honesty, you stop fearing the lack of clarity. You start realizing you don't need clean answers. You just need the right kind of question. That's the lesson buried inside the forking path. You're never going to live in a world where everyone tells the truth. You're always going to deal with contradictions, with unreliable narrators, with people who twist facts, intentionally or not. But if you ask the kind of question that survives both truth and lies, you don't need to panic. You don't need certainty to move forward. And maybe that's what makes this puzzle so powerful. It doesn't promise safety. It teaches you how to walk into danger with your eyes open, knowing the structure of your thinking is stronger than the chaos around you. The who is the spy puzzle. Okay, imagine this. You walk into a room where 5 people are sitting around a table. They all look calm, casual, maybe sipping coffee. But you know for a fact that one of them is a spy. Only one. The other 4 are innocent, loyal, honest, and most importantly, telling the truth. The spy lies every single time. That's their only rule. No truths. Ever. Not even by accident. And here's the twist. You get to ask each person one question. The same question, just one. And it has to be a yes or no question. After that, you've got to make a call. Who's the liar? Who's hiding behind the mask? Now you're in it. You can feel the stakes, the tensions in your throat. Because if you get it wrong, the consequences are brutal. You let the spy walk free. You get it right, maybe you save the mission. Maybe you save lives. But you only get one shot. So what do you ask? That's the genius behind the Who is the Spy puzzle. It sounds like it belongs in an escape room or a spy thriller, but it's pure logic, sharp, edged, and cold. No clues, no tells, just structure and deduction. The setup is clean. The spy always lies. Everyone else always tells the truth. You don't know who's who, and you don't get to ask anything open-ended. You need a single question, the kind that cuts through lies like a scalpel. But here's where it gets tricky. You're not just trying to spot a contradiction. You're trying to force the liar to stand out, using nothing but their own dishonesty. Let me give you a way in. You can ask each person, if I asked you, are you the spy? Would you say yes? Sounds a little weird, right? But that second layer matters. It's a self-referential loop that flips the game. See, a truth teller answers the hypothetical truthfully. If they're not the spy, and you ask them that directly, they'd say no. So when you ask the hypothetical, they still say no. But the spy, this is where it gets slick. The spy always lies. So if you ask them, are you the spy? They would lie and say no. But now you're asking what they would say. And since they're lying about what they would say, they lie about the lie. So they end up saying yes. It's like using their own dishonesty as a weapon against them. They build a wall of lies, and you design a question that loops around and exposes them through their own structure. It doesn't matter if you can't trust what they say. You build a question that makes their lie predictable. And now, suddenly, the spy becomes visible. You go down the line. 4 people say no. 1 says yes. That one, that's your spy. But what really makes this puzzle dangerous, what makes it stick in your brain long after you walk away, is how much it mirrors real life. Not perfectly, of course. People aren't perfect liars or perfect truth tellers. But the logic still hits. How often have you been in a room, unsure of who to trust? Someone smiling, someone nodding, but something in their tone feels off. And you're left wondering, are they honest? Or just really good at pretending? We're taught to trust our gut, to read the vibe, to look for micro expressions or body language. But what if you didn't have any of that? What if you had to rely on pure reasoning, without instinct or emotion? That's what this puzzle demands. Cold logic, no bias, just clean, structured deduction. And what's wild is that the puzzle doesn't get easier if you add more people. If there are 9 people and 1 spy, or 20, the method still works. Because truth stacks, lies isolate. You can design questions that bounce off the truth tellers and reflect the liar's pattern back at you. It's like sonar. You send out a pulse and listen to the way the lie distorts it. That's the heart of this entire thing. Using structure to overcome uncertainty. Not hoping you guess right. Not watching for tells. Just building the kind of question that traps a lie inside its own echo. And maybe that's the part that sticks with you. Not the puzzle itself, but the idea that when someone's entire system is based on deception, you don't have to outsmart them, you just have to outstructure them. Make the game so tight, so clean, that even dishonesty becomes a map. Because in a world where people lie, for survival, for power, for ego, There's something deeply satisfying about knowing that truth can be designed into the question itself. That even the best liar can't escape the shape of a question that turns their lies into answers. The lying oracle. You stand before an ancient stone altar. Carved into its face is a single word ORCLE, and above it, in the shadows of a flickering flame, a voice speaks. Slow, measured, inhuman. You get to ask it one question, anything at all. Life, death, love, fate, danger. The oracle will answer, always without hesitation. But there's a catch. Of course there's a catch. Sometimes it lies. No one knows when. No one knows why. Some say the oracle lies once every 3 questions. Some say it's random. Some think the lie only comes when the answer would break you. But the truth is, you never know. And that makes everything it says poison wrapped in prophecy. You ask, will I survive tomorrow? The oracle says yes, but now you can't sleep. Because what if this was the lie? This is the lying oracle puzzle. It's not just a riddle. It's a mental landmine. The moment you introduce the possibility of deception into something that's supposed to be all-knowing, everything unravels. Suddenly, the answers don't calm you. They infect you. You don't gain knowledge. You gain doubt. And it spreads fast. We're taught to chase truth like it's a reward. Ask the right question, get the right answer, move on. But the lying oracle breaks that model. It hands you what looks like truth, then smirks as your mind starts picking it apart. Because even when it tells the truth, you can never be sure. Even honesty starts to rot when you can't trust the source. And that's the part that makes this puzzle so vicious. It's not about solving for X. It's not about picking the right door or cracking a code. It's about uncertainty. Deep existential uncertainty. The kind that crawls under your skin and stays there. The kind that whispers, what if the lie is the one thing you needed to be true? Now here's the twist, you can still work with this oracle. But you have to change your strategy. You stop looking for a single answer. You start building a system, a structure. You ask questions in patterns. You ask in loops. You ask about the answers to other questions. You cross-reference. You try to trap the lie inside a web of logic so tight it can't breathe. For example, instead of asking, is the treasure buried under the mountain? You ask, if I asked you again, would you still say yes? Now you're not just dealing with answers. You're dealing with the oracle's memory, its consistency, its internal logic. If it says yes now, and yes again later, the odds go up that it's telling the truth. But if the answer flips, something's wrong. The lie just blinked. This technique is called a consistency check. It shows up in logic puzzles, philosophy, even interrogations, and it works not by detecting truth, but by exposing instability. Lies can hide in a single sentence. They struggle to survive in a structure, and that's the lesson buried inside the lying oracle. In life, we love certainty. We crave it. That's why we're drawn to experts, to gurus, to systems that promise clear answers. But what do you do when the answers aren't trustworthy? When the truth comes from a voice that might lie just because it can? You don't give up. You get smarter. You learn to ask better questions. You stop chasing one answer, and you start creating frameworks where the truth can emerge despite the lie. You stop needing to trust the oracle and start trusting the design of your own thinking. That shift, from trusting people to trusting logic, that's everything. Because there will always be oracles in your life. People who seem to know everything. Voices that sound authoritative. Predictions dressed up as destiny. And some of them will lie. For power. for ego, for fun, or just because the world's too messy to tell the whole truth. And when that happens, it's easy to shut down, to believe nothing, to trust no one. But that's not how you win. You win by asking differently. You look for patterns. You test for consistency. You use their answers to build your clarity, even when they try to cloud it. You don't escape uncertainty. You learn to walk through it with your eyes open. And maybe that's what the oracle really is, not a puzzle, not a myth, but a reflection of how we deal with life when certainty fails us, when even the voice on the mountain might be wrong, or worse, pretending not to be. It's a reminder that truth isn't always given. Sometimes it's built. The puzzle with shifting truth tellers. All right, here's a puzzle that doesn't just mess with your logic. It messes with your timing. Not what people say, but when they say it. You're dropped into a world where the rules of truth aren't fixed, where honesty isn't a personality trait, it's a schedule. You meet a group of people. Some tell the truth, some lie. But here's the twist, they don't do it consistently. One person might lie in the morning and tell the truth in the evening. Another might switch every hour. And you have no idea what time it is. Now sit with that for a second. You ask someone a question and they give you an answer. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's a lie. Not because they're a liar, but because right now, at this specific time, that's their lying window. 5 minutes later, that same person might flip completely. The truth shifts. This is the puzzle with shifting truth tellers. And it doesn't just challenge your reasoning. It forces you to think across time. Every question becomes a moving target. It's like trying to land a punch on someone who's constantly changing shape. In the classic version of this puzzle, you're told that everyone either lies on one day and tells the truth on the next, or follows some kind of predictable but hidden pattern. You're allowed to ask questions, but the answers keep slipping through your fingers. You're solving a problem with no steady ground under your feet. Most people break here because we don't like inconsistent systems. We're wired to want things to stay still. We like our liars to be liars and our truth tellers to be honest. But this puzzle says no. It dares you to find clarity in instability. It makes you ask, can you trust someone some of the time? But here's the beautiful part. There is a way through. The key is to stop thinking in absolutes. You stop asking questions like, is this true? And you start asking questions like, would you say yes to this question if I asked you tomorrow? Or even, if I asked you this same thing 3 times today, would your answers all match? What you're doing is time triangulation. You're not just trying to figure out the answer. You're mapping the rhythm of the lie. You're building a profile of the person based on how they answer, not just what they say. And over time, the inconsistency becomes a pattern. See, even liars with a schedule have structure. They're not random. They follow rules, just hidden ones. Maybe person A lies on even, numbered days. Maybe person B switches every morning and evening. Your job isn't to fight the inconsistency. Your job is to decode it. It's like cracking a cipher, but the key isn't in the words. It's in the rhythm. And once you spot the pattern, you can start predicting. You can ask a question now, wait, ask again later, compare. You're testing not just the logic, but the timing. That's what makes this puzzle so different. It's not static logic. It's dynamic logic. Logic that moves. And let's be real, that feels a lot like real life. People don't always lie or always tell the truth. Sometimes, They're honest in the morning, bitter in the afternoon, evasive at night. Sometimes people tell the truth when it benefits them, and lie when it doesn't. But the shift isn't random. There's usually a reason, a trigger, a rhythm, even if it's emotional or psychological or subtle. And once you start noticing that, once you learn to listen to the timing instead of just the words, you become dangerous. Because you're no longer getting tricked by what people say. You're watching when they say it, how they move, what version of them you're talking to. The shifting truth teller becomes a mirror for human inconsistency. It shows you that truth isn't just a fixed object. It's a waveform. It vibrates. It fluctuates. And you can't trap it with blunt logic. You have to dance with it. You have to move in time with the pattern until you understand the beat. There's something weirdly poetic about that. This puzzle teaches you patience. It teaches you pattern recognition. And most of all, it teaches you that the answer isn't always in the answer. Sometimes it's in the second layer, the timing, the frequency, the hidden loop playing underneath the words. So next time you're trying to figure someone out, don't just listen to what they say. Listen to when they say it. Look at the rhythm. Look at the shifts. Because the lie might not live in the sentence. It might live in the timing. The one lies, one is silent puzzle. Imagine standing there, facing two guards who don't just play by usual rules. One of them lies all the time. The other, they won't say a word. Nothing, silence. No hints. No clues. Your entire fate depends on one question, and you get to ask only one. Here's the catch: you don't know which guard is which. The liar could be in front of you, or the silent one. If you talk to the silent guard, you get no answer. If you talk to the liar, they'll lie. So how do you even begin to solve this? How do you make that one question carry all the weight, when half the conversation might be silence, and the other half might be pure deception? The mind reels, right? It's like trying to get the truth out of a locked room, but one door is nailed shut, and the other's been painted with layers of falsehood. You feel stuck. No one ever expects silence to be the bigger threat. Lies are messy, loud. Silence is cold, empty. It makes your brain fill the gaps with doubt and fear. But here's what's wild: as silence is not the absence of power here. It's part of the game. It shifts the rules. It forces you to change how you think about questions and answers. You can't rely on getting a straightforward response. So you have to build a question that forces truth to hide inside the lie, or silence to become a signal. It's tricky. It's like playing chess when half the pieces don't move, and the other half keeps switching sides. What if you try a normal question, like which door leads to freedom, and you ask the silent guard? Nothing. No response. And if you ask the liar, they lie. So you get a useless answer, or nothing at all. No good. So you have to be smarter. You ask a question about what the other guard would say. Something like, if I asked the other guard which path leads to freedom, what would they say? Here's why that works. If you ask the liar, they know the other guard is silent. So the other guard wouldn't say anything. But the liar has to lie about that silence. So they point you to the wrong path. They fake what the silent guard's answer would be, and then twist it. If you ask the silent guard, they don't answer. Silence again. But that silence tells you who they are. So you just ask the question to the other guard. See, you force the liar's hand. You trap them in a loop where lying about silence becomes a lie you can predict, and silence becomes the clue that tells you which guard to question. It's elegant. It's brutal. You're turning what feels like a dead end into a path forward. But think about what this means beyond the puzzle. In life, you don't always get honesty. Sometimes you get silence. Sometimes you get lies. Sometimes you get both, mixed and tangled. People won't give you the truth because they don't want to. Others refuse to answer because silence itself is a form of power. And yet, if you learn to ask differently, if you understand how to turn silence and lies into tools, you can still navigate through uncertainty. This puzzle teaches us that truth isn't always handed to you on a silver platter. Sometimes truth is hidden behind a wall of quiet or wrapped in the shadow of deception. But no matter how thick that wall or dark that shadow, there's always a way to break through if you ask the right question. It's about control, not of the answer, but control of the question. You shape your words so tightly that even silence and lies can't hide the truth forever. What's more, it's a reminder that silence can be louder than words. It forces you to pay attention to what isn't said, to read between the spaces rather than inside the lines, to find patterns in absence. That's a skill we all need, whether we're facing literal guards at a crossroads or navigating conversations filled with half-truths and evasions. And here's the thing. Once you master that, you're no longer hostage to who speaks or who stays quiet. You make the silence speak. You make the lies tell you their secrets. You turn uncertainty into clarity. And in a world that loves to confuse, that's the ultimate power. The day-based truth puzzle. The weirdest part about truth is how slippery it gets when time gets involved. Imagine meeting someone who tells you the truth only on certain days. Like, on Monday they're brutally honest. Tuesday they twist every word. Wednesday they switch back again. And you don't know what day it is. That's not just confusing, it's like reality is folding in on itself. And now you're stuck on an island where everyone plays by these rules. Truth and lies flip, flopping depending on the day. And you have no clue what day you landed on. Your only chance is to ask questions. But there's a catch since their honesty depends on the day. Any answer could be a lie or a truth. You ask someone, "What day is it?" They say Thursday. But what if it's actually Tuesday and they're lying today? You get nowhere. This isn't just a puzzle. It's a mind trap, because the usual ways of pinning down truth don't work. You have no baseline, no clock, no calendar, just a swirl of words that might be true or false depending on invisible rules you don't know yet. Most people get stuck here. They try simple questions, fail, then give up. But this puzzle demands a different kind of thinking, a kind of logic that bends around time itself. Instead of asking direct questions, you ask layered questions, ones that fold days into each other, forcing the truth or lies to unravel. Like asking, if I asked you yesterday whether today is a truth day, what would you say? Sounds complicated, but it's actually brilliant. Why? Because this question forces the person to talk about two different days at once. Yesterday and today. If today is a truth day, they will honestly tell you what they would have said yesterday. If today is a lie day, they'll lie about what they would have said yesterday. You're not just asking about today. You're asking about what they would have said yesterday about today, creating a loop where truth and lies collide. Now imagine you add another question. Say, if I asked you tomorrow whether you will lie today, what would you say? This drags their honesty across 3 days, past, present, future, and pushes their answers into impossible corners. They either contradict themselves or they reveal the pattern. Because here's the key: their lying follows a strict schedule, not random chaos. By forcing their answers to span multiple days, you build logical traps that catch contradictions. This method makes the puzzle less about memorizing facts and more about decoding patterns. It's like listening to a melody and figuring out the rhythm beneath the noise. This puzzle forces you to think of truth not as a fixed point, but as a moving target shaped by time and cycles. And it's deeply human. Because in real life, honesty isn't always a flat line. We shift, we evolve. Our truths bend with context, moods, and moments. Someone might be brutally honest on Monday, but evasive by Wednesday. What we say and what's true depends on when, not just what. The day-based truth puzzle distills this human complexity into a neat, logical challenge. It pushes you to become more than just a questioner. You become a detective tracking truth through time. You learn to build questions that survive waves of deception, that tease clarity out of chaos. And that skill, it's not just for puzzles, it's for life. Because truth is rarely handed to us on a silver platter. It hides behind shifting stories, silent pauses, and changing circumstances. To find it, you have to see the bigger picture. To listen not just to words, but to patterns over time. When you crack this puzzle, the day that seemed impossible to know suddenly feels obvious. The lies and truths no longer confuse you. They fall into place like pieces of a puzzle. It's a powerful moment, like tuning a broken radio until you hear the clear signal through static. This puzzle reminds us that sometimes we're not just looking for a single truth. We're chasing a moving rhythm. And the trick isn't to fight that rhythm, but to flow with it. Once you master that, you're no longer trapped by the days or the lies. You control the conversation, the timing, the questions. You make the impossible possible. The puzzle with reverse questions. You ever try to get a straight answer out of someone who just keeps twisting your questions inside out? Imagine that every question you ask bounces back at you like a boomerang. But instead of coming back the same way, it flips, reverses, or warps in some sneaky way you didn't expect. That's the essence of the puzzle with reverse questions. It's a game where language itself becomes a weapon, where questions don't mean what you think, and every answer pulls you deeper into a maze of confusion. Here's how it starts. You meet two people, one always tells the truth, the other always lies. Sounds familiar, right? But these aren't just ordinary truth tellers and liars. When you ask them questions, they don't respond with a simple yes or no. Instead, they answer with a twist, a reversal, or by reflecting your question back at you, sometimes even turning it inside out. So if you ask one, "Are you the liar?" the answer might not be a straightforward yes or no. Instead, they might say something like, "If I asked you whether you were the truth teller, what would you say?" And now you're stuck trying to untangle what they really mean. What makes this puzzle so maddening is how it messes with your expectations. Normally, when someone lies or tells the truth, you can test their answers by checking for contradictions. But here, the questions themselves are weapons of war. You can't just listen to their words. You have to listen to the shape of their words, how the question itself folds back on itself, and how the answer dances around your original query. Think about that for a second. When someone flips your question around, you're not just talking about truth or lies anymore. You're playing a game where meaning gets reversed. Suddenly, yes can mean no, and no can mean yes, depending on how the question's been turned. It's like trying to read a book printed in a mirror. You know what you want to find, but the way it's presented makes it nearly impossible to see clearly. So how do you get out of this trap? How do you find the truth when every question feels like a trick? The answer lies in crafting questions that trap the liar and truth, teller alike in their own webs. You want to ask questions that are self-referential, questions that force them to answer about what they would say to another question. For example, you could ask, if I asked you whether you are the liar, would you say yes? This kind of question works like a mental snare. Whether they lie or tell the truth, their answer must be consistent because it reflects a statement about a statement. This double, layered questioning is genius because it turns their own reversal tricks against them. The liar can't just lie outright anymore without creating contradictions, and the truth teller can't help but be honest. You create a logical noose that tightens as they try to wiggle free. Let's break it down with a simple example. Imagine you ask the question, if I asked you whether you are the liar, would you say yes? Now, if you're talking to the truth teller, they will say no, because they're not the liar, and they truthfully say what they would say. If you ask the liar the same question, they can't say yes, because that would be telling the truth, which they never do. So their answer also ends up being no, but for a different reason. That shared answer tells you something important about their roles. By playing this mental game, you stop the liar's tricks from working. You use the structure of the question to outsmart the reversal. What's beautiful about this puzzle is how it forces you to think about questions not just as tools for answers, but as puzzles themselves. You're no longer just searching for truth in words. You're analyzing the architecture of questions, the scaffolding behind what's said. You learn that how you ask can be just as important as what you ask, and there's something deeply human in that. Because in real life, conversations are full of half-truths, evasions, and misdirections. People often twist their words, shift meanings, or dodge direct answers. The puzzle with reverse questions mirrors that messy reality. It teaches you to look deeper, to listen not just to the words, but to the structure behind them, to catch hidden meanings buried beneath surface confusion. It's a lesson in patience, in creative thinking, and in seeing through deception without getting tangled in it. But the puzzle isn't just an intellectual exercise. It's a mental workout that sharpens your logic and intuition. You learn to hold multiple layers of meaning in your mind at once, to juggle contradictions, and to spot patterns where none seem to exist. Imagine walking into a conversation knowing exactly how to untangle lies wrapped in reverse questions. You become like a mental ninja, slicing through confusion with the precision of carefully crafted questions. And it feels incredible, because suddenly, what once seemed like impossible riddles turn into solvable puzzles. The twists and turns that used to trip you up become paths you can navigate. In a way, this puzzle is a metaphor for life itself. We all deal with people who bend the truth, who answer questions with silence or sidesteps, who play verbal games to hide what they really mean. The puzzle with reverse questions trains you to cut through that fog, to find clarity where others see only confusion. So next time you face someone whose answers don't line up, whose words feel like they're folding back on themselves, remember this puzzle. Remember that the trick isn't just to listen harder. It's to ask smarter, to craft your questions so cleverly that they reveal the truth even when words try to hide it. Because in the end, That's the power of the puzzle with reverse questions, turning the game of lies and truths into a battle you can win by asking the right questions in the right way. Everyone lies but once. At first, it sounds like it should be easy. You're told that everyone in the group lies, but only once. Just once. Every other time, they tell the truth. And you think, okay, that's manageable. That's a pattern I can work with. But then it starts sinking in. One lie, anywhere, at any point, in any sentence. It could be the first thing they ever said to you, or the last. You don't know when it happened. And you realize this is worse than dealing with a constant liar. With a full-on liar, at least you know what you're dealing with. You know not to trust anything, but with someone who lies only once, everything is poisoned in this subtle, terrifying way. You're constantly asking yourself, was that the lie? Or was it something before? Or is it still coming? The deception here isn't loud. It's quiet. It hides in the space between honest words. And that makes it way more dangerous. Let's say you're given a group of people, and each one makes a few statements. You're told only one of those statements from each person is a lie. Just one. The rest are true. And now your job is to figure out who's guilty of something, or where the treasure is, or which path leads to safety. Here's where your brain starts doing somersaults. You can't just look for contradictions anymore, because the lie doesn't have to contradict anything. It could be a small detail that subtly shifts the meaning of the truth. It could be hidden inside a statement that sounds trustworthy. That's the genius of it. You can't even rely on tone. You have to think structurally. Let me walk you through what this really feels like. You get a set of 3 statements from one person. They say, first, I never left the house that day. Second, I saw Rachel go into the garden. Third, the key wasn't in the drawer. Now, one of those is a lie. That's all. Just one. But which one? If they didn't leave the house, how did they see Rachel? If the key wasn't in the drawer, how would they even know that? Your mind starts piecing together a mental map, imagining scenarios, flipping assumptions, rotating facts like puzzle pieces trying to click together. It's like you're playing chess, but every piece on the board could be a decoy, and your only weapon is logic. Cold, careful logic. But the moment you misplace the lie, the whole thing falls apart. If you assume the wrong statement is false, it's like turning the wrong gear in a machine. Every other moving part goes off track. And yet, there's always a way through. Here's the twist that makes this kind of puzzle so addictive. Every piece of the truth actually wants to help you. The truth statements are consistent. They work together. They form a shape, a logic, a structure. The lie is the only piece that doesn't quite fit, like a jigsaw piece from the wrong box. So your job becomes find the misfit. It takes patience, not just intelligence, but restraint. Most people rush it. They make guesses. But this puzzle punishes speed. It rewards control. Because every time you land on a possible lie, you have to ask, okay, if that was the lie, do the other statements line up? Do they support each other? Or do they create contradictions? This is where the real fun starts. You start trying every possible combination in your mind. You take each of the 3 statements and temporarily assume that this one is the lie. You see how the rest plays out. You follow the chain of logic, and eventually, if you're careful, only one version actually works without breaking the rest. And when that moment hits, when the noise clears and everything lines up, it's like your brain exhales. It feels like finally tuning into the right frequency on a radio. And here's what's wild. This puzzle maps onto real life in a creepy way. Because most people don't lie all the time. In fact, most people lie once. One small moment. A single phrase. A detail twisted. A truth softened. The hardest lies to detect are the ones sitting right in the middle of honest stories. And that's what this puzzle trains you for. It teaches you how to spot the moment where the story bends. It trains your intuition to look past the noise of mostly true and into the structure of what doesn't belong. That's a powerful skill. It teaches you that detecting a lie isn't about being skeptical all the time. It's about discerning the break in consistency. So by the end of this puzzle, you're no longer just hunting for liars. You're hunting for when they lied. Which, honestly, is a scarier, deeper, more realistic version of deception. Because in real life everyone lies. But almost never all the time. And if you can learn to detect that one crack in the truth, that one sentence that doesn't belong, you don't just solve puzzles. You see people more clearly. And maybe you even start to speak a little more carefully yourself. Nestedly are puzzles. Have you ever opened a box only to find another box inside, and then another one? It feels clever at first, then a little weird, and then you realize, this is no ordinary puzzle. This thing is layered. It's hiding its truth behind layer after layer of misdirection. That's exactly what a nested liar puzzle is like. On the surface, it might seem like your typical liar riddle. Someone lies. Someone tells the truth. Ask the right question and boom, you've got your answer. But nested liar puzzles laugh at that idea. They say, nah, let's go deeper. Let's build a puzzle inside a puzzle. Let's make sure every answer you get is based on someone else's answer, which is based on another answer, which is maybe a lie or maybe not. Suddenly, you're not just trying to figure out who's lying. You're trying to figure out what it even means for something to be true in the first place. Let me show you how quickly this messes with your brain. Say you've got three people A, B, and C says B is lying. B says C is lying. C says A is lying. Now you're stuck in this rotating cycle of accusations. Who's actually lying? Each claim depends on the other. There's no clean starting point. It's like trying to solve a puzzle while the pieces keep rearranging themselves in real time. This is what makes nested liar puzzles so brutal and so addictive. They're not just testing your logic. They're testing your endurance, your ability to hold multiple possibilities in your mind at the same time without snapping. You can't just solve them linearly. You have to go recursive. You have to think in layers. What if A is telling the truth? Then B is lying. Which means C is telling the truth, but wait, that contradicts A's statement. Okay, rewind. What if A is lying instead? It's like trying to figure out whether the dream you're in is part of another dream. You wake up only to realize you're still dreaming. What makes these puzzles powerful is the way they break your trust in surface logic. You can't just take anything at face value. Every statement is wrapped in layers of context, and that's where the tension lies. Every layer pulls you further from certainty and deeper into analysis. Most people get frustrated with these puzzles because they want a clean, obvious answer, a fixed point of reference. But nested layer puzzles are designed to take that away from you. They force you to work backwards from contradiction. You have to build your own foundation of logic inside the chaos. Think of it like this. Imagine you're inside a hall of mirrors. Each person reflects someone else's truth, or lie, or partial truth, and the reflections never stay still. If you try to look at just one mirror, you get tricked. But if you step back, if you look at how all the mirrors line up together, you start to see the pattern, and that pattern is the only way out. There's a hidden elegance to it. Let's zoom out a bit. Why do these puzzles feel so strangely real? Why do they echo something deeper than just entertainment? Because human conversations often work like this. One person says something based on what they think another person meant. Someone else responds based on what they believe that interpretation was. Miscommunications layer on top of each other until no one really knows where the original truth went. This happens in politics. It happens in relationships. It happens online all the time. Nested layer puzzles hold up a mirror to that. They show you what it's like when truth isn't isolated, when it's embedded inside other people's versions of reality. You might think you're hearing the truth, but really, you're just hearing someone else's reaction to a truth they never verified. And that's terrifying, because it means even honest people can accidentally pass on lies just by being one layer too deep. And just like in the puzzle, you can't get clarity until you untangle the layers. There's also a weird comfort in mastering puzzles like these. Once you understand how the layers stack, you can start working from the inside out. You can spot inconsistencies at the core. You can ask the right questions that cause the outer layers to collapse. You stop being overwhelmed by complexity, and you start controlling it. There's a moment in every nested liar puzzle where the logic clicks, where all the chaotic statements align into one clean shape. It's a rare feeling, like turning static into a song. Suddenly, everything that seemed impossible is obvious. That's the reward. That's why these puzzles hit so hard. They give you the feeling that no matter how tangled the world seems, there is a way through it, a method, a key. And maybe that's the whole point. We live in a world full of nested truths. Opinions wrapped around assumptions, wrapped around emotion, wrapped around half-heard facts. It's messy. But if you train your mind to think recursively, to peel back those layers, you don't just become a better puzzle solver. You become a better thinker. Majority versus minority truth puzzle. You walk into a room full of people, and every single one of them is making statements. Some are true, some are false. But here's the twist. You know that the majority are telling the truth. The rest, lying, that's all you've got. And now your job is to figure out who's who, just by listening. Seems easy, right? Just listen for the consensus. Find the answer most people agree on and call it a day. Nope. The second you start trusting the majority, the puzzle turns on you, because liars, smart ones, know exactly how to blend in. If they know they're outnumbered, they don't go against the grain. They echo it. They camouflage their lie inside the group's truth. They become shadows inside the crowd. And suddenly, the whole puzzle flips. Now it's not just about identifying the truth. It's about understanding the behavior of deception inside a system designed to favor honesty. That's way scarier. Because in these puzzles, the danger isn't the loud, obvious liar. It's the one who whispers just enough truth to earn your trust. Let's take an example. You've got 7 people. They each say something like, "The treasure is not behind door A. The treasure is behind door C. It's not behind door B. It's not behind door A, door C, door B, not A." You're told 5 people are telling the truth. 2 are lying. Now pause and look at that. 4 people say, not A. 2 say C. 1 says B. At first glance, You want to go with the majority, not A. That's what most people said. But then you realize, not ah isn't an answer. It's a filter. That doesn't tell you where the treasure is. It just tells you where it isn't. Or, at least, where they claim it isn't. The problem is, multiple statements can be true at the same time without pointing to the same conclusion. That's where your brain gets twisted. You start wondering, are people converging on one answer, or are they fragmenting the truth just enough to keep me guessing? This is where the beauty of the majority vs. minority puzzle kicks in. It's not about figuring out what's true. It's about figuring out what must be true based on the system's design. You start to reverse engineer the logic. If I assume this is true, does it allow enough room for the remaining statements to also be true and still keep the liar count where it needs to be? You run simulations in your mind. You test assumptions. What if door B really is the correct answer? Then the person who said door B is truthful. But what about the others? If that's the case, who has to be lying? This constant toggling, this mental seesaw of logic, is the engine of the entire puzzle, and it hurts in the best way. The psychology behind it is fascinating too. Our brains are hardwired to trust majority consensus. In evolutionary terms, it made sense. If everyone ran from the bushes, you ran too. If the tribe said the berries were safe, you ate them. Going against the majority felt like asking to get eaten or poisoned. So when a puzzle like this flips that instinct on its head, it makes you uncomfortable. You're being told most people are telling the truth, and you still can't trust it. That kind of mental dissonance is what makes these puzzles stick in your head long after you've solved them. It's not just about logic. It's about challenging your relationship with trust. And it's disturbingly relevant. Think about the world we live in. Social media, politics, news. There are constant battles between majority perception and minority disruption. And often, it's not about facts. It's about noise, echo chambers, algorithms reinforcing opinions until they feel like truth. Just because a belief is popular doesn't mean it's right. And just because something is said by a few doesn't mean it's wrong. This puzzle forces you to dissect that. It asks, can you separate what's popular from what's provable? Can you stand in a room of people and still trust your own analysis, even if it goes against what most of them say? That's the hidden lesson here. These puzzles don't just teach logic, they teach independence. They train you to pause, verify, and resist going with the flow just because it feels safe. And there's something else. Sometimes the liars want to lose. Not in the game, but in real life. They want to be exposed. There's a strange phenomenon where some deceptive characters in these puzzles slip up on purpose, like they're begging someone to finally see through the mask. And if you're paying close enough attention, if you track not just what people say, but how their words line up against the structure of the puzzle, you'll catch that tiny crack, that glitch in the majority, and then you win. Not because you trusted the crowd, but because you trusted yourself to dig deeper than surface logic. Majority versus minority truth puzzle. You walk into a room full of people, and every single one of them is making statements. Some are true, some are false. But here's the twist. You know that the majority are telling the truth. The rest, lying, that's all you've got. And now your job is to figure out who's who, just by listening. Seems easy, right? Just listen for the consensus. Find the answer most people agree on and call it a day. Nope. The second you start trusting the majority, the puzzle turns on you because liars, smart ones, know exactly how to blend in. If they know they're outnumbered, they don't go against the grain. They echo it. They camouflage their lie inside the group's truth. They become shadows inside the crowd. And suddenly, the whole puzzle flips. Now it's not just about identifying the truth. It's about understanding the behavior of deception inside a system designed to favor honesty. That's way scarier. Because in these puzzles, the danger isn't the loud, obvious liar. It's the one who whispers just enough truth to earn your trust. Let's take an example. You've got 7 people. They each say something like, "The treasure is not behind door A. The treasure is behind door C. It's not behind door B. It's not behind door A, door C, door B, not A." You're told 5 people are telling the truth. 2 are lying. Now pause and look at that. 4 people say, not A. 2 say C. 1 says B. At first glance, you want to go with the majority, not A. That's what most people said. But then you realize, not ah isn't an answer. It's a filter. That doesn't tell you where the treasure is. It just tells you where it isn't. Or, at least, where they claim it isn't. The problem is, multiple statements can be true at the same time without pointing to the same conclusion. That's where your brain gets twisted. You start wondering, are people converging on one answer? Or are they fragmenting the truth just enough to keep me guessing? This is where the beauty of the majority vs. minority puzzle kicks in. It's not about figuring out what's true. It's about figuring out what must be true based on the system's design. You start to reverse engineer the logic. If I assume this is true, does it allow enough room for the remaining statements to also be true and still keep the liar count where it needs to be? You run simulations in your mind. You test assumptions. What if door B really is the correct answer? Then the person who said door B is truthful. But what about the others? If that's the case, who has to be lying? This constant toggling, this mental seesaw of logic, is the engine of the entire puzzle, and it hurts in the best way. The psychology behind it is fascinating too. Our brains are hardwired to trust majority consensus. In evolutionary terms, it made sense. If everyone ran from the bushes, you ran too. If the tribe said the berries were safe, you ate them. Going against the majority felt like asking to get eaten or poisoned. So when a puzzle like this flips that instinct on its head, it makes you uncomfortable. You're being told most people are telling the truth, and you still can't trust it. That kind of mental dissonance is what makes these puzzles stick in your head long after you've solved them. It's not just about logic. It's about challenging your relationship with trust. And it's disturbingly relevant. Think about the world we live in. Social media, politics, news. There are constant battles between majority perception and minority disruption. And often, it's not about facts. It's about noise, echo chambers, algorithms reinforcing opinions until they feel like truth. Just because a belief is popular doesn't mean it's right. And just because something is said by a few doesn't mean it's wrong. This puzzle forces you to dissect that. It asks, can you separate what's popular from what's provable? Can you stand in a room of people and still trust your own analysis, even if it goes against what most of them say? That's the hidden lesson here. These puzzles don't just teach logic, they teach independence. They train you to pause, verify, and resist going with the flow just because it feels safe. And there's something else. Sometimes the liars want to lose. Not in the game, but in real life. They want to be exposed. There's a strange phenomenon where some deceptive characters in these puzzles slip up on purpose, like they're begging someone to finally see through the mask. And if you're paying close enough attention, if you track not just what people say, but how their words line up against the structure of the puzzle, you'll catch that tiny crack, that glitch in the majority, and then you win. Not because you trusted the crowd, but because you trusted yourself to dig deeper than surface logic. Conditional liars. Imagine someone walks up to you and says, "I always lie except on Wednesdays." At first you laugh. Cute. One of those liar puzzles. But then it sinks in. Wait, what if today is Wednesday? Then they're telling the truth. Or are they lying about telling the truth? You suddenly realize you're inside a trap. Not a trap made of lies. A trap made of conditions. Conditional liars are the worst kind, because they don't lie all the time, and they don't tell the truth all the time either. They play by weird, shifting rules. They're not random, they're patterned. But the pattern isn't obvious. Sometimes it's tied to the day of the week. Sometimes it's whether someone else just spoke, or if a specific condition is met, like they lie only if they are the first to speak, or only if the person before them lied. So instead of decoding a lie, now you're trying to decode why someone might be lying. Their statement isn't just a claim, it's a move in a larger system, and that, right there, is where your brain starts melting. Let's walk through an example. 3 people stand in a line, A, B, and C. Each one makes a statement. Person A says, B is lying. Person B says, C is lying. Person C says, A always tells the truth. Now here's the twist. You're told that one of them lies only if the person before them told the truth. Another one lies only on Mondays. The last one tells the truth unless they are standing at the end. You're not solving who lied. You're solving why. You're untangling this knotted web of logic, time, position, sequence, and behavior. This isn't about truth versus lie anymore. It's about input and output, cause and effect. And here's where it gets diabolical. Because sometimes the puzzle designer will give you no clue what the condition is. They'll just say, each person tells the truth or lies based on a hidden rule. Now you're working in the dark. You're not just solving. You're learning the system while solving it. That's brutal. But also, kinda thrilling. Because here's what starts happening in your brain. You begin to test theories like a scientist. You make an assumption. You follow its consequences. You spot a contradiction. Boom, assumption fails. Try again. You create your own tiny universe of logic and try to make it stable. It's not just solving a riddle. It's building a working model of human behavior under weird constraints. And that skill, that's gold. We live in a world full of conditional truths. People act differently when they're tired, or when they're scared, or when their boss is watching. We are all, in some way, conditional liars. We soften honesty in front of authority. We exaggerate stories in social settings. We omit facts when they hurt someone we love. These aren't wild lies. They're situational strategies, and puzzles like this expose that human quirk under a microscope. That's why conditional liar puzzles hit harder than the basic ones. You can't just go, "Oh, this guy always lies," and move on. You have to hold multiple timelines in your head. You have to think, if this is Tuesday, and this person lies on Tuesday, then what they said is false, which means you turn into a detective working inside a moving logic machine. One of the most savage examples of this is a puzzle where you meet someone who lies only if the question you ask has a correct yes or no answer. That's right. They lie only when the answer is clearly yes or no. Otherwise, they're truthful. So now, even your questions become part of the logic. Ask the wrong one, and you trigger the condition that forces them to lie. Ask it a better way, and suddenly you unlock the truth. It's like chess meets psychology. And that's the bigger idea. These puzzles teach you that context matters. Truth is rarely absolute. Most people don't lie or tell the truth all the time. They lie when it's useful, or when they're scared, or when they think they won't be caught. Conditional behavior is everywhere, and recognizing the trigger is often more important than the outcome. Once you master that, everything changes. You stop asking, "Is this person lying?" and start asking, "What would make them lie right now?" You begin to look not just at the statement, but the situation, the stakes, the incentives, the patterns, and when you apply that kind of thinking in the real world, you become 10 times sharper. Because liars don't usually announce themselves. They blend in. They tell the truth just enough to earn your trust. But every now and then, on the right day, in the right conditions, they slip. And if you know what to look for, you'll catch it. That's what conditional liars teach you. Not just logic, but vigilance, pattern recognition, and how to find truth in systems designed to bend it. Truth depends on who's asking. You ever notice how some people answer the same question differently, depending on who is asking? Not because they're confused, not because they changed their mind, but because the identity of the person asking changes what they feel comfortable saying. That's the core of this puzzle. The truth isn't fixed. It's elastic. It bends depending on the asker, which sounds insane until you realize this is exactly how real life works. People lie to their bosses, tell partial truths to their friends, and save the raw honesty for strangers or therapists. The truth is filtered. It's curated. And sometimes it's deliberately reversed, depending on who's in front of them. Now picture that baked into a puzzle. You step into a scenario where a group of people will only tell the truth to certain questioners. To others, they lie. Same question, different asker, different answer. Your job: figure out not just the answer, but who needs to ask it to get the real one. Let me give you a taste. Imagine you're on an island with 3 natives. Each one either lies or tells the truth depending on who's speaking to them. You're told this person tells the truth to friends, but lies to enemies. Another lies to everyone except their leader. And the third just lies to everyone, but pretends they're telling the truth when asked by a child. Yeah. Now imagine you're one of the askers, and you get 1 question per person. 1 shot. No repeats. Suddenly, you realize the question is only half the puzzle. The relationship is the other half. You can't just say, "Where's the treasure?" You have to think, what do they see me as? Friend, enemy, leader, outsider. If you don't understand your own identity in their eyes, you can't trust any answer you get. And that's the real twist. The truth is personalized, not objective. It's like a mirror that shows a different image depending on who stands in front of it. This makes the logic harder because you're not just tracking who said what. You're tracking social dynamics, perceptions, emotional filters. Suddenly, this simple riddle feels like a game of politics wrapped in code. But here's what really breaks your brain. Sometimes the puzzle doesn't even tell you the rules about who gets told the truth. It forces you to figure out the relationship based on the answers. You start seeing patterns. One character always says no to every question you ask, but you notice they say yes to someone else who asks the exact same thing. That contradiction, that's your key. That's how you reverse engineer the social logic underneath the puzzle. You're not just solving riddles anymore. You're solving people, and it mirrors something really familiar. Think about family. Think about how differently people talk to their siblings, their parents, their kids. Now picture someone who says, "I'm fine," to their boss, "I'm not okay," to their best friend, and nothing at all to their spouse. Same person. Three versions of the truth, all shaped by context. In puzzles like this, we're just stripping that behavior down and making it explicit. Let's go deeper. One variation gives you a room with 3 gates, each guarded by someone. You know that one gate leads to safety, and the other 2 don't. The guards can only answer yes or no questions. But here's the rule: one guard tells the truth only if the person asking is the same gender. One lies unless you're younger than them. The third one flips a coin internally, unless you ask a question about someone else. Then they're reliable. If your brain's screaming right now, good. That's the point. These puzzles are designed to break lazy thinking. You're forced to hold layers of identity, perception, and interaction all at once. And here's the psychological gut punch. These aren't just logical tricks, they teach you something real. The idea that truth is fixed is a myth we cling to. But in life, truth is always shaped by relationships. People confess things to strangers they'd never admit to a partner. Others lie to protect, lie to please, lie to survive. So if you really want to understand someone's truth, you can't just ask a question. You have to understand who you are in their world. That's what this puzzle trains you to do. It weaponizes perspective. You start thinking like a strategist. Not just, what do I ask? But, who should do the asking? Maybe the answer isn't getting the question right. It's getting the identity right. And once that clicks, you start noticing this everywhere. In conversations, in interviews, in negotiations. The words matter, sure, but who says them and who hears them might matter even more. That's why this puzzle sticks with you. Because once you see that the truth can shift depending on the listener, you stop taking answers at face value. You look at the angle, the motive, the fear, the loyalty. You look at why this person would lie to you, and what might make them tell the truth to someone else. And that doesn't just solve puzzles. That solves people. The 3 answers puzzle. Imagine you're faced with a question. A simple question, maybe like where to find a hidden treasure or which door leads to safety. But instead of just one answer, you get 3 different answers from 3 different people. 3 answers that don't line up. They contradict each other. One says yes, the other says no, the last says maybe. And here's the kicker. You're told only one of those answers is correct. The other 2 are false, but you don't know which one. So you have to figure out which answer to trust. Sounds straightforward, right? Well, it's anything but. The puzzle twists when you realize the problem isn't just about picking the right answer. It's about unraveling why the other 2 are false. Because sometimes, the lies don't just contradict the truth, they also contradict each other. Which means by comparing the answers to each other, you start peeling back layers of deception and logic. It's like solving a mystery where each clue points you closer, but also adds confusion. Here's the thing. When you have 3 answers, you have a dynamic. The relationship between the answers is as important as the answers themselves. Think of it like a conversation where people might be lying or telling the truth, but their lies are tangled in patterns. If two are lying, but their lies clash, you know something's off. You can use that clash to eliminate options, narrow down possibilities, and get closer to the real truth. Let's imagine three people standing in front of you. Person 1 says the key is in the left box. Person 2 says it's in the right box. Person 3 says the key isn't in either box. You can only pick one answer as true, so you start testing the statements. If person 1 is telling the truth, then the other two must be lying. But does that make sense? If person 3 says the key is nowhere in the boxes, but the key is in the left box, then person 3 is lying, which fits. Person 2 says right box, but if key is left, they lie too. That works. So person 1's statement could be true. But the puzzle gets more complex when some answers are conditional. Maybe person 2 only lies if person 3 is lying, or person 3 tells the truth only if person 1 lies. These tangled conditions force you to juggle multiple logical threads at once. Suddenly, you aren't just comparing statements. You're trying to decode relationships between truth and lies embedded in them. It's a logic dance where one misstep breaks the whole flow. What's fascinating is how this puzzle teaches you to see beyond individual answers and focus on the patterns between them. It's about understanding the ecosystem of statements, not just each isolated claim. When you look at three answers together, their contradictions and alliances form a kind of puzzle code. Decoding that code requires patience, creative thinking, and a sharp eye for inconsistency. You start asking questions like, if this person's statement is true, what does that imply about the others? And if it makes any other statement impossible or nonsensical, you discard it. This process is a kind of logical pruning. You weed out impossibilities until only one answer survives unscathed. It's brutal but elegant. And here's the mind bender. Sometimes all three answers seem plausible on their own. Each one could be true in a different world or scenario, but the puzzle demands that only one is true in this reality. That means you have to find the scenario that fits perfectly and excludes the others. It's not enough to say, well, this could be true somewhere else. You need to find the only truth here. This sharpens your thinking. You're forced to think beyond surface facts and explore deeper logical consequences. The three answers puzzle doesn't let you rely on gut feeling or guesswork. You have to break down each answer's ripple effects and see how they interact. The emotional payoff when you finally crack it is huge. There's a satisfying click in your mind when you realize that everything else falls apart except for that one solid answer. It's like shining a light in a dark room and watching the shadows disappear. That feeling hooks you in and makes you want to keep chasing the next puzzle. These kinds of puzzles also mirror real life. Sometimes, when you ask three different people the same question, you get wildly different answers. Understanding which one to trust means looking at their motives, relationships, and how their statements relate to each other, much like you do in the puzzle. So next time you face conflicting information, remember this puzzle. It teaches you to look for patterns, contradictions, and the way pieces fit together. Not just what's said in isolation, because truth is often hidden in how answers relate to one another, not just in the words themselves. The truth chain puzzle. Imagine you're in a room with a line of people, each one facing the next. Every single one of them makes a statement. But here's the catch. Whether their statement is true or false depends entirely on the truthfulness of the person before them. It's not about just lying or telling the truth. It's about a chain reaction of honesty and deceit. One link breaks, and the whole chain could snap or twist in unexpected ways. This is the essence of the truth chain puzzle. It's like a domino effect, but with words and logic. If the first person tells the truth, then the next person's statement has to be true or false depending on that. If the first person lies, the second statement flips in meaning, and so on down the line. Suddenly, you're not just decoding a statement, you're decoding a sequence of trust and betrayal, each one dependent on the last. And that complexity, it messes with your brain in the best way. Think about it like this: you know that the first person in the chain says, "The sky is blue." If that's true, the second person's statement, say, "The first person is lying," must be false. But if the first person is lying, then the second's claim is true. So you're forced into this back and forth logic dance, bouncing truth and lies down the chain. By the time you reach the end, every statement has to fit perfectly, or the whole chain collapses. What's wild is how the puzzle pushes you to think about causality in language, how one statement's truthfulness controls the next, and so on, like a carefully balanced ecosystem. You can't just treat each statement in isolation. You have to hold the entire chain in your mind simultaneously. It's like juggling flaming torches. One dropped truth can set everything ablaze. Here's where the shock sets in. If even one person in the chain is lying, it flips the truthfulness of all subsequent statements. So the truth of a statement isn't just about what's said. It's about who said it, and the chain before them. This makes you realize that truth isn't absolute here. It's relative, contingent, almost fragile. Imagine you have 5 people in the chain. The first says, "I always tell the truth." The second says, "The first person lies." The third says, "The second person tells the truth." Fourth, the third person lies. And fifth, the fourth person tells the truth. Your head spins, right? Because each statement depends on the previous one. You start mapping it out mentally, trying to find a pattern that fits all 5 statements without contradiction. And if you get it wrong, you hit a wall where the logic implodes. But this puzzle doesn't just exercise your brain. It teaches you a subtle truth about communication and trust. In life, the reliability of what someone says often depends on what others before them said. Rumors spread, stories change, trust builds or breaks. The truth chain puzzle is a metaphor for that fragile human network of belief. What's even more fascinating is that you have to sometimes work backward. You know the last statement, and you try to reason up the chain to see what must be true or false for everything to hold. It's like solving a mystery in reverse, peeling back layers to find the root cause. The emotional charge here is that you realize trust isn't binary. It's a series of connections where one falsehood can ripple through and twist everything. That makes you appreciate how fragile honesty is in relationships, organizations, even societies. It also gives you a sense of control, because if you understand the chain, you can pinpoint where the truth breaks and figure out who to trust or doubt. Solving the truth chain puzzle is like being a detective in a maze of words. You learn to test hypotheses, trace consequences, and hold multiple possibilities in your mind until only one consistent truth remains. That process sharpens your thinking and makes you see communication as a living, dynamic system. And the payoff, when you finally crack the chain, all those conflicting statements snap into place. It's like a secret code unlocking, and everything suddenly feels clear. That moment of clarity is addictive. It makes you want to dive into the next puzzle and untangle more complex webs of logic. So next time you hear conflicting stories or see a chain of blame, think about the truth chain puzzle. It reminds you that truth flows through connections and context. One lie can twist everything that follows, but understanding the chain helps you find your way through the fog. Color-coded liars. Imagine walking into a room where people's honesty isn't just random. It's tied to the color they wear. Not metaphorically. Literally, their color dictates when they lie or tell the truth. You might think this sounds like some fantasy world logic, but it's exactly what makes the color-coded liars puzzle so fascinating and maddening at the same time. The rules are simple on the surface, but deceptively complex underneath. Someone wearing red might always lie. Someone in blue might always tell the truth, and someone in green might lie only when asked a question about red. The catch: you don't get to know the color rules up front. You have to figure them out by listening closely, asking questions, and watching patterns emerge. At first, you might try the obvious. Ask each person a straightforward question and see if their answers match reality. But here's the twist. What if the person in red lies, but also lies about lying, meaning their answers are double, layered lies or truths, depending on the color of the questioner? It's not just about who lies or who tells the truth. It's about when and to whom the lies apply. The colors act like secret codes, signaling when honesty breaks down and when it holds firm. Now, imagine trying to solve a mystery under these shifting rules. You ask someone in green if they are lying, but they answer, no. Are they telling the truth? Or lying because the question involves a color they respond to differently? It quickly turns into a logic maze where every answer's meaning shifts based on color. This forces you to map the entire room's color relationships, creating a mental web that is both exhausting and thrilling. What makes this puzzle so satisfying is how it mirrors real-world scenarios. Think about social groups where certain behaviors depend on context, like how people might behave differently at work versus with family or friends. Their color changes metaphorically, and so does their honesty. You start seeing that truth and lies are not fixed states but fluid, influenced by identity and circumstance. As you dig deeper, you realize that to solve the puzzle, you can't just trust any answer at face value. You have to test patterns, asking the same question to people wearing different colors, checking for contradictions, and using the inconsistencies to crack the code. It's a kind of scientific method applied to human behavior hypothesis. Experiment, observe, and refine. Then comes the real shock. Sometimes the puzzle reveals that two colors are intertwined. Maybe reds lie only to blues, but tell the truth to greens. Blues lie only when asked by greens, but always tell the truth to reds. The complexity skyrockets, and you're forced to keep mental notes on not just who is lying, but why and when. You're no longer solving a simple puzzle, but navigating a labyrinth of conditional honesty. And here's the kicker sometimes. The puzzle includes a wildcard color, a person whose honesty depends on the majority color in the room or even random chance. This throws off all your neat patterns and forces you to rethink your approach completely. It's like the puzzle is alive, adapting and evolving as you dig deeper. By the end, solving the color-coded liar's puzzle trains you to think like a detective and a psychologist simultaneously. You learn to read between the lines, to spot subtle clues hidden in contradictions, and to understand how social context shapes the truth. It's more than just a game. It's a lesson in human nature and the fluidity of honesty. So next time you encounter a group where the truth feels slippery, remember the color-coded liar's puzzle. It reminds us that honesty is not a fixed point, but a shifting spectrum, colored by who we are and who's asking. And mastering that complexity, that's the real prize. Non-human liars, let's make this harder. A lot harder. You walk into a room, no people this time. No villagers, no prisoners, no guards. Instead, you're facing machines. Maybe a talking robot, maybe blinking terminals, maybe something even weirder, like a magical mirror that answers questions, and each one gives you a statement. Some are honest. Some lie. Some might lie only under certain conditions. And here's the twist. They aren't human. So all your instinctual tools, facial expressions, tone of voice, body language, gone. You have to rely purely on logic. No gut feelings. Just raw deduction. Welcome to the world of non-human liars. These puzzles throw you into a game where deception isn't emotional. It's structural. The liar doesn't care. It doesn't have motives. It just follows rules. Cold, brutal, precise rules. And that makes them way more dangerous than human liars. Take this. You're in front of two identical machines. One always tells the truth. One always lies. You can ask one question. Just one. If you ask either machine, if I were to ask the other machine whether this door leads to freedom, what would they say? You now have to interpret a lie about a lie or a truth about a lie, depending on which machine you're talking to. You are now 3 layers deep in logical hell, and you only get one shot. It gets worse. Some non-human liars don't lie all the time. Some lie only when their circuit counter is odd. Others might answer truthfully until they detect a pattern in your questions, then start flipping their answers. Some are programmed to lie only on Tuesdays. You can't read their faces because they don't have any. You can't ask, "Why are you lying?" Because they don't know. They're not malicious. They're just operating under rules, rules that you have to uncover. This is where your brain starts sweating. You don't just analyze the answer. You analyze the structure of the answer, the format, the conditions, whether the answer flips depending on question phrasing. You're no longer just solving a riddle. You're reverse engineering the code behind the lie. That's the shock. That's what makes these puzzles so brutally addictive. You begin to notice patterns. Maybe machine A always says yes when it should say no, except when asked about itself. Then it reverses. Maybe terminal B gives opposite answers on odd, numbered questions. Now you're writing things down, mapping them, drawing logic trees. You're turning into a detective, a programmer, and a philosopher all at once. And here's the validating insight. Real, world logic works the same way. You can't always trust information at face value, especially when it comes from structured systems like algorithms, bureaucracies, or even legal language. These puzzles train your brain to think structurally. They teach you to ask, what rules could produce this answer? Not just, is this answer true? That skill is gold. Because in life, most lies aren't emotional. They're systemic. A policy that sounds good but contradicts itself. That's a logic error in a system. A social media algorithm that promotes one type of post over another and then denies it. That's a machine with rules you haven't uncovered yet. Non-human liars teach you how to break those systems apart, piece by piece, until the truth reveals itself. But the real punch comes when the puzzle turns philosophical. What if a machine is programmed to lie, but it doesn't know it's lying? What if it gives a false answer it genuinely believes is true because its source data is corrupted? Is it still a liar? Is truth about intent or about output? That gray area makes the puzzle deeper and creepier. Now you start to play with edge cases. Can a non-human liar lie to itself? Can it forget its own logic and contradict its earlier answers? Could two machines lie in collaboration, one supporting the other's falsehood just to confuse you? These aren't just abstract games. They're reflections of the kind of logic that runs artificial intelligence, smart assistants, and automated decision-making systems we rely on daily. And then, the best part, when you finally crack it, when you realize that if you phrase your question a certain way, it bypasses the machine's deception rules and forces a corner case truth. When you trap the liar in its own logic and force it to admit the truth, even while trying to hide it, that moment feels less like solving a puzzle and more like beating a system that was designed to beat you. So yeah, non-human liars are cold, they're calculated, and they're some of the most rewarding logic traps you'll ever encounter. Because when you win, it's not just a mental flex. It's a battle of pure reason, and you came out on top. The silent liar. You're facing a group of people. Some speak, some stay completely silent. You've been told that among them is a liar. Maybe more than one. Maybe all of them. But there's one extra twist. The liar might never say a word, not a single syllable. Just silence. That changes everything. In most liar puzzles, we're trained to catch lies based on what people say. A contradiction here, a falsehood there. But what if someone's lie isn't something they said? It's the choice to say nothing. The silent liar flips the entire game. It forces you to stop looking for false statements and start asking, why would someone say nothing at all? This is where the psychological gears start grinding. Silence isn't neutral anymore. It's strategic. It becomes a weapon. Imagine 3 people standing in front of you. You ask each, "Are you the liar?" The first says no. The second says no. The third stays silent. What do you do with that? It's not just unsettling. It's completely disorienting. Our brains are wired to read communication. When someone refuses to play, the rules collapse. Suddenly, the silence feels louder than any lie. You're forced to decide, is that silence guilt, or just fear, or indifference, or something worse? Is it manipulation? That's the shock. Silence makes you fill in the gaps yourself. It creates a vacuum your brain needs to fill. And the silent liar puzzle exploits that. It makes your own assumptions part of the deception. That's the genius of it. You can't just detect the liar. You have to detect why the liar stayed silent. And that's a much harder problem. Now, here's the deeper cut. In a typical silent liar scenario, the liar is silent not because they're afraid of being caught. They're silent because they know the truth is dangerous. Saying anything could give it away. So instead, they let you guess. They let you build the narrative. They let you hang yourself with your own logic. And that, right there, is the scariest kind of deception. The kind that never even speaks. But here's where things get really interesting. Silence can mean different things depending on the puzzle's structure. In some versions, silence means refusal to answer. In others, it's selective. The liar only responds under certain conditions, or the liar may never speak unless directly addressed by a specific person. Or the lie is embedded in when they speak, not what they say. Now your job isn't to evaluate answers, it's to decode patterns. Suddenly, every pause, every refusal, every blank stare matters. You're not solving a riddle anymore. You're solving a person and the validation. This puzzle exposes something about real life that most people miss. Silence is communication. In relationships, in interviews, in politics, silence carries weight. A well-timed pause can imply truth, or guilt, or distance. The silent liar puzzle teaches you to read those moments. Not just what's said, but what's not said, and why. It also teaches discipline. Most people rush to fill silence. They panic. They speak just to end the discomfort. But the silent liar sits in that discomfort, forces you to question yourself, forces you to wonder if silence is safer than honesty. And that moment, that hesitation, is where the real test happens. That's when the puzzle turns inward. Let's push this further. Say you have 5 people. One is the liar. You can ask each person one question, but one of them doesn't answer, just shakes their head. Now you're spiraling. Was that a lie of omission? Did they break the rules? Or are they using the rules against you? And here's a final gut punch. Sometimes the silence is a trap. Some puzzles include a mechanic where the liar must remain silent to win. So if you identify them by their silence, you win. But in others, the silence is a red herring, a decoy, a perfectly executed distraction. It makes you doubt the quiet one while the real liar speaks comfortably and misleads you with confidence. That's the tease. The silent liar puzzle never gives you what you want. It never confirms your suspicion. It just waits. It waits for you to interpret silence wrong. It waits for your logic to fold in on itself. And when it happens, the liar doesn't smile, doesn't gloat, doesn't confess. They just keep sitting there. Silent. Lie Detector logic puzzle. You step into a room where a machine sits at the center. A lie detector. The kind you've seen in movies, with blinking lights and needles jumping wildly whenever someone tells a fib. Only here, it's not just a gadget, it's a puzzle. The catch. This lie detector isn't perfect. Sometimes it tells the truth, sometimes it lies, and it doesn't care who it's judging. Its readings can be right, dead wrong, or even purposefully misleading. And your challenge, to figure out who is telling the truth and who is lying, all based on what this unreliable machine reports. Imagine you're interrogating 3 suspects. You ask each a question, and then the machine gives you a reading, truth, or lie. But here's the kicker. The machine sometimes flips its own readings. It might say someone is lying when they're telling the truth, or say they're truthful when they're spinning a web. You don't know when it's honest or deceitful. Now you're stuck between 2 layers of deception. The suspect's own honesty and the machine's unpredictable verdict. That's where the puzzle gets wild. You can't just trust what the suspect says. You can't even trust what the machine says about the suspect. You have to find a way to cross-check, to layer your questions, and to force the machine into a corner where its lies become clues rather than obstacles. Every answer, every machine reading is a piece of a chaotic puzzle, but with a logic pattern buried somewhere beneath. Think about it like this. If the machine tells the truth, then the suspect's answer is either honest or a lie as indicated. But if the machine lies, the suspect's answer's honesty is reversed. So each time the machine accuses someone of lying, you have to question, is this a real lie or a machine's lie about the truth? That creates a tangle of possibilities where each outcome depends on the truthfulness of the detector itself. This forces you to ask questions designed to reveal not just the suspect's honesty, but the machine's reliability too. For example, if you ask a suspect, "If I asked the machine whether you lied earlier, what would it say?" and then compare that to the machine's actual reading, you begin to build a logical map. It's a mental chess game, forcing truths and lies to unfold through layers of reasoning. Here's the shock: the puzzle is almost like dealing with a schizophrenic machine. It can't be trusted, and yet it's your only tool. You have to use its failures against it, turning every contradictory signal into a stepping stone. The uncertainty becomes a tool rather than a dead end. And that's counterintuitive, because normally a lie detector is supposed to be your truth weapon. Here, it's your biggest source of confusion. The beauty of this puzzle is it mimics real life more than you think. How often do you receive information from sources that are unreliable or biased? Maybe a news article is partly true, but partly misleading. Maybe a witness in a court case has a shaky memory or an agenda. Just like the lie detector machine, truth in the real world often comes wrapped in layers of distortion. And the only way to reach it is through careful, strategic questioning. The puzzle validates your instinct that truth isn't black and white. It's a complicated weave of facts, half-truths, and deceptions. And your job is to untangle the thread. You learn to hold two conflicting possibilities in your mind at once: that the machine might be lying and that the suspect might be lying. That mental flexibility, that tolerance for uncertainty, is exactly what sharpens your logical skills and your intuition. And here's the tease. Once you master the logic, you start to see how to design your own questions too. Break the machine's lies. You craft questions that force the machine to reveal its own truthfulness indirectly. You learn to trap it, to corner it, to force it into revealing when it's lying by creating situations where a lie would contradict itself. Suddenly, what seemed like an impossible puzzle becomes a challenge of your own making. In the end, the lie detector logic puzzle teaches you a crucial life skill. Truth is never handed to you on a silver platter. Sometimes the tools you use to find it are flawed, deceptive, or outright hostile. You have to be smarter than the machine, smarter than the lies, smarter than the confusion. Only then do you get close to the truth hidden beneath. Probability-based liar puzzle. You know how sometimes in life you can't just trust one person's word. Maybe you're in a group, and someone says one thing, another says the opposite, and you're left wondering who's telling the truth. Now, imagine you actually know that some percentage of these people are liars. You don't know who, you don't know exactly how many, but you have a number, a probability. Maybe 50% of them lie, maybe more, maybe less. And you're stuck trying to figure out the truth just by asking questions. Welcome to the probability-based liar puzzle, where logic meets chance and every answer is a piece of a bigger statistical mystery. This puzzle throws the classic liar puzzle into a completely new dimension. It's not just one liar and one truth teller standing opposite each other. It's a whole crowd, and the only thing you can count on is that some fraction are lying, and that fraction isn't fixed forever. It might be 60% or 30% or 80%, but it's always less than 100%. What does that mean? It means you can't simply label someone as truthful or dishonest based on a single answer. Every response is a roll of the dice. Imagine you're given a group of 10 people, and you know 6 of them are liars. You ask each person, "Is the sky blue?" Some say yes, some say no. You know the sky is blue, so the no answers must come from liars. But here's the catch. What if they're coordinated? What if they want to confuse you? Suddenly, every no answer is suspicious, but so is every yes answer from someone you don't know. You're swimming in a sea of uncertainty where your job is to find the pattern hiding in the noise. This is the shock of the probability-based liar puzzle. It forces you to stop thinking in absolutes. You can't trust a single statement on its own anymore. Instead, you start thinking about the group as a whole, about percentages and likelihoods. Your brain shifts gears from who is lying to what is the probability that this person is lying given the answers I've heard so far. It's not black and white anymore. It's shades of gray, subtle shifts in likelihood, and the interplay of statistics and human deception. You might wonder how to even start solving something like this. The key is strategic questioning. You don't just ask straightforward yes or no questions anymore. You ask questions designed to maximize the chance of getting truthful answers. For example, you might ask questions that only truth tellers could answer correctly under certain conditions, or questions where liars are forced to contradict themselves eventually. Every question becomes a statistical probe, a way to test the overall consistency of the group's responses. What's fascinating is how this puzzle validates real-world thinking. In everyday life, truth often emerges from patterns rather than individual facts. Think about polls or surveys. No one respondent is perfectly reliable, but when you look at the whole data set, trends appear. Or think about social networks where rumors spread. Some people lie, some tell the truth, but the truth eventually reveals itself through the collective. The probability-based liar puzzle taps into this intuition and makes you sharpen it. Another layer adds complexity. What if the probability itself changes as you gather information? Maybe you discover that more than half the group is lying, or fewer. Maybe the liars adapt their answers based on what they hear. Now the puzzle isn't just about logic or statistics. It's about dynamic systems and game theory. You're playing against an opponent who changes the rules on you, forcing you to adjust your strategy constantly. At its heart, the puzzle teaches you a crucial lesson. Sometimes you can't get perfect certainty, only better odds. And sometimes the smartest move isn't to trust one answer or one person, but to look at the big picture and use probabilities to guide your judgment. That's a powerful mindset, not just for puzzles but for real life where misinformation, bias, and deception are everywhere. The tease here is irresistible. Once you start thinking this way, you see probability-based deception all around you. In politics, in media, in social circles. The puzzle invites you to become a detective who reads beyond words and looks at patterns, frequencies, and likelihoods. It challenges you to question your assumptions about truth itself and shows how even a crowd full of liars can be untangled with the right questions and a bit of statistical insight. So next time you feel stuck between conflicting stories, remember this puzzle. Truth isn't always a simple yes or no. Sometimes it's a probability, a pattern, a puzzle you have to solve with patience and careful reasoning. And that's where the probability-based liar puzzle shines. It makes you smarter, more skeptical, and far better equipped to navigate a world where everyone might be lying some of the time. Code word liar puzzle. Imagine walking into a room full of people. You know some are liars. You know some tell the truth. And you know that somewhere in the answers they give, buried inside their words, is a single code, one code word that unlocks the truth of the entire situation. But here's the kicker. No one wants you to find it. The liars are actively working against you, and even the truth tellers can only give you so much. This is the code word liar puzzle, and it's the kind of riddle that makes your brain sweat. You're not just solving a mystery. You're untangling a mess of language, deception, and logic all wrapped up in a single question. Who can I trust, and what the hell is the truth? Now here's the shock. In most liar puzzles, you're trying to figure out who is lying. But in this one, that's not even your main goal. The liars, they're not just tossing random falsehoods at you. They're throwing down decoys, strategic distractions designed to pull you away from the code. And the truth tellers, they're not being direct. Their words don't say the code out loud. They might hint at it. They might tell you what the code is not. So now you're not just parsing statements. You're reading behavior. You're reading intent. Let's say each person gives you one word, just one, and you know only one of them is actually saying the correct code word. Everyone else is either giving a lie or a misdirection. What do you do? Do you go with the word that sounds the most reasonable? Do you go with the one that's repeated most often? That might be exactly what the liars want you to do. And that's when it hits you. The puzzle isn't asking for a gut decision. It's asking for a strategy. You might start cross-referencing words. Maybe some words contradict each other. Maybe certain phrases can't coexist if more than one of them is true. And slowly, a pattern starts to form, not because any one person gave you the answer, but because the structure of the lies exposes the truth. That's the validation moment. This puzzle rewards pattern recognition over certainty. It forces you to zoom out, look at the whole set of answers, and notice what they're orbiting around. And this applies far beyond logic puzzles. This is how misinformation works in the real world. You don't spot a lie just because it sounds wrong. You spot it because it doesn't line up with the rest of the system. The truth isn't loud. It's consistent. And that's what this puzzle teaches you. Consistency is a better test of truth than confidence. Liars often sound sure of themselves, but their story doesn't hold up under cross-examination. That's the power of structure-based thinking. You're also learning how to design better questions. If you know the liars will always say something false, then you can build questions that force them to eliminate themselves. For example, you could ask, if I asked the person next to you what the code word is, what would they say? That sounds simple, but think about what it does. A liar referencing another liar leads to a contradiction. A truth teller referencing a liar exposes falsehood by proxy. Suddenly, you're stacking logic like dominoes, waiting for the right one to fall and show you where the truth actually is. Here's where it gets even more twisted. Some versions of this puzzle add rules like liars must say a word that shares a letter with the real code word. Or, truth tellers can't say the code word directly but can use synonyms. Now you're not just chasing words. You're navigating a whole semantic battlefield. You're trying to crack a safe while the dials are spinning and the room is filling with smoke. It's logic under pressure, and it's addictive. So how do you win? You stop listening to people. You start listening to structures. You listen to patterns. You ask yourself, if this person is lying, what does that mean for the others? What words become impossible? What words stay alive? You work backward, then forward, then backward again, until finally there's only one word left standing. One code word that fits every rule, survives every contradiction, and refuses to be disproven. And once you've found it, once that word clicks into place, you realize this wasn't about figuring out who to trust. It was about using lies as tools to reveal the one thing that can't be faked, the truth beneath them. Now here's the tease. What happens when the rules shift mid-game? What if liars can sometimes tell the truth, but only if it misleads? What if the code word itself changes, depending on who's asking the question? Suddenly, the puzzle becomes a psychological game. Now you're not just solving logic, you're solving people, and that takes this to a whole new level. Contradiction chains. It always starts with just one person saying something that doesn't sit right. Then someone else responds, and now, suddenly, their statement doesn't line up with the first. A third person jumps in, and what they say contradicts both. Now your brain kicks into overdrive. Something is off. Someone's lying. Maybe more than one. But here's the twist. It's not about catching one single lie. It's about tracing the chain of contradictions they're creating. Welcome to the contradiction chain puzzle, where the truth isn't hidden in silence, but in the collisions between what people say. This isn't like a simple, one tells the truth, one lies, riddle. This is a logic brawl. Everyone is talking. Every statement someone makes either aligns with or breaks from someone else's. And your job? Track the contradictions like dominoes. One falsehood can unravel everything, but only if you can find the exact link where the whole structure breaks. Let's break this down. Imagine you're facing a line of 5 people. Each makes a statement about someone else. A says B is lying. B says C is lying. C says D always tells the truth. D says E is lying. And E says A is lying. You don't know who is honest. You don't know how many liars there are. But here's what you do know: truth can't contradict itself. Which means if you follow a line of statements and hit a contradiction, someone in that path is bluffing. This is where things get fun and frustrating, because your instinct might be to focus on one person and try to solve them first. But that never works. Why? Because the puzzle isn't about individuals. It's about relationships. One person's lie only matters in the context of someone else's truth. You're solving a network, not a node. It's like detective work on a logical battlefield. Here's the shock: the puzzle flips your brain's natural way of reasoning. We're used to thinking in isolated facts. We love the idea of a single lie being obvious, catching someone red-handed. But this puzzle teaches you that a lie is most visible when it conflicts with a whole system of truth. It's not the statement itself that gives it away. It's the ripple it sends through the rest. And what's brilliant is that contradiction chains happen in real life more than we realize. Ever been in a group where 2 people tell slightly different versions of a story? At first, they both sound plausible. But then a third person chimes in, and suddenly the cracks appear. One detail that doesn't align. One time that doesn't make sense. And boom, the chain collapses. It's the exact same logic, just without the puzzle framing. So how do you solve it? You start looking for closed loops. If A says B lies and B says A lies, that's a loop. One of them has to be lying, or maybe both. Then add C, who says B is honest. Well, if C is telling the truth and B is honest, then A must be lying. But if that leads to D's statement being impossible, contradiction. You work these loops over and over, eliminating possibilities until only one consistent configuration of truth and lies remains. Here's where the validation hits. Once you've found the consistent thread, the arrangement where all truths hold up and all lies fall apart, it feels right. You don't just know it logically. You feel the tension release, like finally hearing the right chord after a dissonant mess of notes. That moment when all the contradictions line up and fall away. That's the magic of this puzzle. You've built order from chaos. But let's not forget the liars themselves. In these puzzles, they don't always lie just to lie. Sometimes, they're smart about it. They craft lies that seem harmless on their own, but blow up the moment you try to connect them with someone else's story. That's intentional. These puzzles are often designed so that you can't rely on gut feeling. You have to follow logic like a bloodhound, step by step, link by link. Now the T's imagine a contradiction chain puzzle where not all statements are verbal. What if one person points instead of speaking? What if another writes their statement down but never speaks it? What if liars can only lie about certain types of people, or only when asked about even numbered individuals? Now you've taken the core idea and turned it into a living logic machine with layers. The deeper you go, the more you start to love the mess. Because once you learn how to spot contradiction chains, you don't just use it for puzzles. You start seeing it everywhere. In conversations, in politics, in media. The moment someone's statement creates a ripple that doesn't line up, your brain catches it. You don't just think, that doesn't sound right. You think, that breaks the chain. That's power. And the puzzle gave it to you. Mathematical liar puzzles. You're given a set of statements and they sound simple, clean, mathematical. Person A says, I'm telling the truth. Person B says, A is lying. Person C says, exactly one of us is lying. That's it. That's all you get. No dramatic flair, no strange characters, just math and logic. And yet, within those few quiet lines lives an absolute battlefield of contradiction, deduction, and tension. This is the world of mathematical liar puzzles, where every word counts, and the answer is buried under layers of numerical reasoning and human deception. And here's what makes them especially ruthless. The puzzle doesn't hide anything. There's no tricky wording, no misdirection. Everything is right there on the page. But because the statements are mathematical in nature, things like, two of us are lying, or only one of us tells the truth, your brain has to toggle between interpreting human behavior and solving for truth like it's a damn algebra problem. And that's the shock. These puzzles weaponize your logic. They don't confuse you with emotion or narrative. They throw you into a world where lies live inside numbers. You don't just guess who's lying. You calculate it. Let's walk into one. 3 people stand in front of you. They each make a statement. A says, I am telling the truth. B says, A is lying. C says exactly one of us is telling the truth. So now the game begins. One of them could be right. 2 could be wrong. Or the reverse. The solution doesn't come from instinct. It comes from systematically checking what's possible and seeing which combinations don't break. Start with assuming A is telling the truth. That would make A's statement true, obviously. B says A is lying, so B is lying. C says, exactly one of us is telling the truth, but we already have A telling the truth and B lying, so C would also be telling the truth, which makes 2 truth tellers. But C said only one is truthful. Boom, contradiction. So let's try something else. What if A is lying? That means A's statement is false, so A is not telling the truth. That checks out. B says A is lying. If A is lying, then B is telling the truth. C says, Exactly one of us is telling the truth. Well, in this case, A is lying. B is telling the truth. C, we don't know yet. But C's statement would be true if only one person is telling the truth. And so far, that's just B. That fits. A's lying. B's telling the truth. C's telling the truth about only one being truthful, which would be two truth tellers. Contradiction again. Eventually, after testing every permutation, you land on the only configuration that holds. That's the magic of it. These puzzles force your mind to simulate every possibility, run them like experiments, and eliminate the ones that break. It's not intuition. It's controlled logic. Here's the validation moment. Once you solve one, it changes how you see every similar problem. You stop reacting emotionally to what people say. You start testing their words like equations, and you can build puzzles like this infinitely. Add more people. Add nested statements. Person A says B is lying. Person B says C is telling the truth. Person C says A and B are not both liars. Now you're not just solving. You're navigating a forest of statements, pruning each one by logic until only the consistent branches are left standing. These puzzles are surprisingly close to real life, especially in things like forensics, decision-making, and negotiations. When people give conflicting accounts, what do? You check for contradictions. You see which version breaks when tested against others. You don't need to know who's lying. You just need to find the one version that fits with the rest of reality without breaking. It's mathematical, but it's also psychological. Some puzzles even include statements like, exactly two of us are lying, or the number of liars is even. That introduces a meta layer. Now it's not just what someone said. It's how many people said it, and how their truths or lies affect the group as a whole. You're no longer just identifying a single person. You're solving for a total structure that has to add up. Now here's the tease. Imagine this. You're given a set of people who only make mathematical statements. But one of them always lies, and instead of telling you, I'm lying, or they're lying, they say things like, the sum of liars is greater than one, or FA is lying, then I am lying. Now you're in deep water. You're not just decoding behavior. You're running logic statements through a kind of mental compiler. Welcome to puzzles that behave like proof systems, where liars mimic logic and truth hides inside implications. And you can go even deeper. What if someone lies, but only if the number of liars is prime? What if a person tells the truth, but only if the number of honest people is a square number? Now the entire riddle becomes an equation, and solving it feels like cracking a code that was designed to resist brute force. That's the addictive part. These puzzles don't just test your ability to follow logic. They test your ability to construct it, break it, rebuild it, and test it again. You don't just find the answer, you earn it. Riddle in disguise. Sometimes the most deceptive puzzles don't announce themselves as puzzles at all. They wear a different face. They slide into the conversation like a harmless question or a weird situation, and before you even realize it, you're tangled in logic. That's what makes a riddle in disguise so dangerous. It doesn't look like a riddle. It doesn't feel like one. But by the time you're halfway through trying to answer it, you're trapped. These are the kinds of layer puzzles that are built to lower your guard. They borrow the structure of everyday talk, or they hide inside stories where the deception isn't obvious. You think you're just working out a quirky detail, but underneath it, there's a minefield of lies, contradictions, and assumptions designed to trip you. Here's an example. A traveler comes to a fork in the road. That sounds familiar, right? But this time, he's not given a riddle. No warning. No mysterious setup. Just two locals standing there, talking to each other. One of them says to the other, "If I were you, I'd go left." The other replies, "That's why you're not me." That's it. That's all the traveler hears. There's no clear question. No overt puzzle, but if he wants to survive, he needs to decode that very real, very hidden liar scenario. So what do you do? First, you have to recognize that something is off. That's the hook. These puzzles are all about patterns. And the moment you notice that the conversation doesn't follow a normal pattern, your brain starts searching. Wait, why would someone say, "That's why you're not me"? What does that imply? Are they disagreeing? Are they hiding something? Then it hits you. The disguise is the setup. The riddle is happening in real time behind the words. That's the shock. The realization that the puzzle never started with a question. It started with a statement, and that statement was built to test how deeply you listen. Most people hear it and keep walking. They assume it's just dialogue. But if you stop, if you really dig into what they're saying, you realize it's loaded with contradiction and implication. This is where the deeper structure of liar puzzles comes in. A well-designed liar puzzle wants you to believe it's not a puzzle, because that's the perfect trap. It lets your guard down. It makes you think emotionally instead of logically. And the moment you do that, the logic slips past you. There's a psychological principle at work here, something called cognitive framing. When you frame a question like a joke or a casual statement, the listener processes it differently. They're less analytical, less suspicious. They interpret it based on tone and mood, not structure. And that's exactly why these riddles in disguise hit so hard. They let you build the wrong mental framework, then twist it. Let's dig into another one. You're told on a strange island. There are people who always lie on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, and tell the truth on the other days. You meet someone who says, "Tomorrow, I will lie." That sounds simple. But wait, that's a paradox in disguise. If he's telling the truth today, then he must be lying tomorrow. But if he's lying tomorrow, then what he's saying today is true. But that would mean he's telling the truth on a day he should be lying. Contradiction. The beauty of the puzzle hides in the simplicity. Nothing flashy. Just a weird sentence in a brain that suddenly realizes it's spinning in circles. The disguise is so casual, so subtle, that by the time you notice the logic trap, you're already knee-deep in it. And here's the validation. Once you spot it, once your brain catches on that you're already inside the puzzle, the disguise vanishes. The fake exterior drops, and now it feels like a real mental opponent. The clues were there the whole time. You just didn't know you were supposed to be looking. That shift, from casual to critical, is the reward. You realize that puzzles don't have to wear costumes. Sometimes the most clever ones look completely normal, like a sentence you'd overhear in a hallway, like a quote from a sarcastic friend. But underneath that surface, pure logic, hidden structures, carefully arranged truths and lies wrapped in plain language. Now here's where it gets evil. Some riddles in disguise take it further. They don't even include a question or an answer. They rely on you to ask the wrong question. That's the next level. You're given a situation, and you assume the goal is X, but the real riddle is that you're supposed to be asking why. It's a meta trap. a logic problem disguised as a misunderstanding. And when you fall for it, you don't just get the wrong answer. You don't even realize there was a puzzle at all. It's like trying to solve a maze without knowing you're inside one. Every turn feels random until suddenly you hit a wall that wasn't supposed to be there. That's when it clicks. You weren't wandering. You were being tested, so the next time something feels a little too ordinary, a bit too smooth, too funny, too casual, stop and think. Was that just a line? Or was it a riddle wearing a mask? Group lie deduction. It's easy to spot a single liar in a crowd. One person says something off, and your gut lights up. Something doesn't add up. But what if everyone in the group is saying something that only makes sense if someone else is lying? That's when things go sideways. That's when you enter the chaos of group lie deduction. See, this isn't about catching a liar. It's about balancing a system. Every lie affects the others. Every statement creates ripples. You can't just zoom in on one sentence anymore. You have to treat the entire group like a machine. One wrong assumption, and the whole thing collapses. Here's how it works. You're given a group of people, maybe 4, maybe 6, and they each say something about the others, not themselves. That's the trick. No one says, "I am lying." They say, "Alice is lying," or "Only 2 of us are telling the truth." Now you're not just checking for falsehood. You're dealing with a logic web, a system where every strand connects to the next. Let's try one. 4 people. A says B is lying. B says C is lying. C says D is lying. D says A is lying. No fluff. Just 4 sentences, each pointing to the next. At first glance, it feels circular, like a logical merry-go-round. So how do you break the loop? Start testing. Assume A is telling the truth. That means B is lying, so B's claim that C is lying must be false, meaning C is telling the truth. C says D is lying, so that's true. D is lying. But D says A is lying. That's a lie, which means A is telling the truth. Look at that. The loop closes cleanly. No contradictions. But here's the catch. That configuration only works if the liar count matches the rules. Maybe the puzzle says 2 people are lying, or maybe it says only one is telling the truth. That's where the real challenge begins. Not just solving for logical consistency, but matching that consistency with an external constraint. That's the shock factor. You realize that even if something seems logically sound, it might not actually meet the conditions. A group deduction puzzle is a 2-level game. First, you test if the statements support each other. Second, you test if the solution matches the rules, the number of liars, the structure of who knows what, and sometimes the order of speaking. Here's where people get tripped up. You can't trust your instinct. These puzzles are built to give you false positives, configurations that look clean, but quietly violate a rule, like a setup where everything checks out. But wait, now there are 3 liars, and the puzzle only allows 2. Boom, back to square one. So how do you validate anything? You have to create a mental table, list every possible combination. What if A is lying? What does that imply for B? And what does B's truth status imply for C? And so on. You carry that logic chain until you hit a wall, a contradiction. Or, if you're lucky, a perfect loop with the right number of liars and truth tellers. That's when the puzzle stops being a question and becomes a system. You're not just solving, you're debugging. It's closer to programming than storytelling, and your brain starts treating people like variables. If A is false and B is true, then C must be false. Wait, contradiction. Roll it back. new assumption. Run the system again. And the deeper the puzzle goes, the more you have to hold in your head at once. It's not just deduction. It's mental bookkeeping. Each truth you assume must carry downstream consequences, and if one domino falls wrong, the entire chain resets. Here's what makes it brilliant. These group lie deductions are not just logic games. They mirror real, world reasoning. Think about jury deliberations, or corporate boardrooms, or even group chats where multiple people are giving conflicting stories. You don't get perfect clarity. You get fragments. You get people pointing fingers at each other. And your job becomes not just to identify who's lying, but why that lie fits into the greater system. Because in many of these puzzles, the lie isn't personal. It's structural. They lie because they must, to make the truth work. That's the twist most people miss. Sometimes a lie is necessary for balance. And now here's the tease. What if the puzzle adds another level? What if some people lie only if someone else is lying too? Like A says, I am telling the truth only if B is also telling the truth. B says, C is lying. C says, A and B are not both telling the truth. Now you're not just testing who's lying. You're testing conditional relationships, dependencies, chains. It's no longer one statement at a time. It's a network of if, then logic, a system where every lie can flip the truth of another. And these puzzles can scale up endlessly. You can go from 4 people to 10. You can layer in rules like only one liar per pair, or liars cannot speak first. And each time, the complexity doesn't just grow linearly. It grows like a spider web, branching in all directions. So when you solve one, that's not luck. That's mastery. You didn't just guess right. You mapped the system. You saw the machine hidden inside the words. And you made it balance.